Welcome, everybody, to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live with Deculturation. We're given, because it's 3 hours earlier out there on the West Coast, we're giving Carlos a few moments to finish his breakfast, both metaphorically and literally. And then we will get into it in a minute. Please take a minute, like, share, subscribe, support the Patreon. And also head down into the show description if you are not subscribed to Deculturation's two YouTube channels, one that usually features the live streams and then one that kind of archives the older work that he does and curates it a little bit. Then make sure you are subscribed to both of those as well. Shout out to the chat. Good to see everybody this morning on this Friday. A whole lot going on in the world. Solidarity to, people struggling. Um, yeah, hello to all the free people of the world. And yeah, I mean, we're going to get into a bunch of stuff today. We're going to talk about, as deculturation focuses a lot of the energy around critiquing and looking at the public pronouncements and media work of these kind of left liberal, social democratic, outlets, but also politicians. We'll talk about that. We are definitely going to be talking about ICE today and Rachel Nicole Good, as well as, and I just looking up trying to find their names. I haven't actually seen that published, but I'm sure it's out there. We'll probably find it today. There were two people shot by, I think, Border Patrol actually in Portland, Oregon yesterday, which, as somebody from Oregon, I hate to tell the United States, but there's not a border there. Um, but we'll get into that, and also how that's, I think there's some hypocrisy even in how that's covered, which I know we'll get into this, right? There's a certain attention, obviously, around Rachel Nicole Good as, a white legal observer and somebody who showed up to, monitor the activities of ICE and like solidarity to all the people who do that, right? But there is a certain way that you get a liberal sphere of folks that want to show up about that, and we'll talk about that. Talk about the way that it's being instrumentalized by the Democratic Party right now, as well as how the Republican Party is relating to this. There was a couple of comments that were a little spicy the last time we had Carlos on, and so we'll get into that, give him space to respond, talk about a little bit of that. Um, and what else? We're definitely going to talk about Venezuela and responses, and also like, you know, this weird thing where you have kind of people showing up now who've really been a part of demonizing the Venezuelan project for a lot of years, I think. Um, but anyway, that's did I not say Rachel Nicole Good? I thought I did. Apologies if I said that wrong. I was saying the two folks who were shot in Portland yesterday was the ones I didn't know. Um, all right. Without further ado, deculturation. Carlos, welcome to the platform again, man. It's good to see you again this morning.
How we doing, brother? Thank you for having me on. I
I,
appreciate it.
I'm
Renee.
saying Rachel, Renee. That's what I'm messing up. My bad, y'all. Apologies. Renee, Nicole, good. Um, I don't know what's going on psychologically where Rachel and Renee are the same name to me, but that's okay. There's something going on there. So, man, where do you want to start today?
Yeah, I mean, man, it was difficult because, the initial plan was to talk about Venezuela, and my criticism was going to be on a lot of these voices that normalize this, imperial smearing of Nicolás Maduro, that essentially are doing imperial propaganda, even if they, speak out of both sides of their mouth. The moment that you start labeling him a dictator, you're serving empire. That's what you're doing. And it's funny that we can all acknowledge and recognize that, or most of us can, when Jorge Ramos is doing, even bragging about calling it the Miami baptism, where you have to denounce Cuba, you have to denounce Venezuela as dictatorships. And in doing so, you're calling for and you're agreeing with and you're complicit in regime change. Mamdani did that. In fact, he went above and beyond, just like Bernie Sanders, his mentor and the leader of these nationalist socialists, of creating a distinction between their type of civilized, humane socialism in the form of the Nordic model compared to, this authoritarian dictatorship of, the black and brown people. We're not like that. He made that distinction. That's not what we're trying to do here. And in doing so, you are putting a stamp of approval on their removal, whether it's from office or, the taking of their life through assassination. That's what you're doing. That's what you're proactively doing. And every other leftist, radical liberal, whatever they want to call themselves this week, that repeated that and was pushing the idea that Nicolás Maduro, stole the elections, that he's not a legitimate president. And you're seeing, just like with Chavez, El Pueblo coming together and saying, no, this is our leader. And you're seeing the racial distinctions as well. And you've always seen that with the Chavistas and compared to, these European descendants. And of course, it's predominantly, a European space over here on the online left, whatever you want to call it. And they're all still advocating for the same thing, essentially, even if they try to cover their asses by saying, well, he is better than if a Western puppet, this and that. You're just trying to play both sides at that point. And you're not even doing it in a believable manner because you should know better. But for whatever reason, you have to vilify these individuals because they're not doing things exactly the way that you want them to be done. And even more childish is you're expecting Maduro to be making all the same decisions and taking all the same actions that Chavez did when the material conditions change. Or you point at Cuba and being like, well, why has Cuba been able to do this and that? Different conditions.
Different decades, different
Yeah.
centuries.
So,
Yeah.
and not only that, but like, during the Cuban Revolution, they talked about the struggles of, having to start essentially from scratch. Right. And so they had that time to organize, and they had, for better, for worse, the Soviet Union's backing. So what does Venezuela have? And people point at China. Look, I have criticisms of China. Why are you becoming, the Zionist entity's greatest trading partner? That doesn't seem necessary in any degree for me. But to take it to the extent that to expect them to start World War III, when China has very clearly, in my opinion, looked at the Soviet Union and its downfall and said, we're going to avoid as many mistakes that they committed as possible, and we're going to prioritize the safety and well-being of our project and our people. And that sucks, but that puts the responsibility on the rest of us. And to point fingers, like I don't know. I've never been that in a personal. Like I don't point the fingers at other people and expect them to do things for me on my behalf. I don't know why we do that on a geopolitical level. It makes no sense to me. It's in fact really frustrating because it lets me know that you're just sitting around waiting for a savior. I don't understand like what in your reading or education process has led you to believe that anyone's going to come and rescue you. It's on us to, I always say I'm a bad atheist, pray with our feet. It's that simple. And, people calling for marches. I understand that you got to show up. I get that aspect of it. And I understand that it's almost comforting to go out and march and yell. How many more years are we going to do that for Gaza before realizing that what Kwame Ture told us is accurate? It's not about mobilizing, it's about organizing. And we lack that. So I'm kind of going all over the place. And it's funny enough, I was saying all that to say that because of the murder of Renee Good, we kind of had to change up the conversation a little bit, or literally last night I messaged you being like, look, man, like I know this was I love the thumbnail, but especially as a comic book fan, but I think we're gonna have to talk a little bit more on Renee Good and the consequences of betraying whiteness overall, and the aspect of what does it mean that when white people do betray whiteness and do step away from it, that it seems like, and I'm trying to be careful with my wording because I truly believe that what Renee Good did was heroic. It is a true act of solidarity. I was seeing some of her like stories in Spanish, and it is it's heartbreaking because you hear a lot of these, gabachos, gringos, whatever, these güeros, trying to speak Spanish, and sometimes it's annoying. Even as a pocho, even with my Spanglish, sometimes it's annoying because it's like, oh, you're trying a little too hard, and it's coming off obnoxious, and you're gonna go ahead and go to a Mexican restaurant and try to like overdo it and make it more complicated for everyone because this is your moment to shine. And you listen to Renee Good, and it's like it's not that at all. It is so heartwarming and so caring. And so when I talk about the fact that, and I was having a difficult time, verbalizing this, is I'm not saying in any way that this was her fault. She was put in a trap. She was put in a trap. I do not think there was a single way where her life would have been safely guaranteed. I want to make that very clear. All I'm saying is that the only sliver of hope would have been if she just turned off the vehicle and put her hands up. And even then, they still would have found a way to brutalize her, if not still execute her in public. Because it was about making a point. Because you don't want white people to get any ideas in their head about betraying the project of whiteness, of the settler colonial empire. You want to make sure that you make an example out of them. Because that shit might spread. And especially when we're talking about white women, if the state cannot weaponize them as victims of black and brown violence, especially emphasizing, rape. That's always been a big catalyst. They're at risk of losing that support, that foundation, because white women historically have been right at the side of white men of educating their youth and of spreading the white supremacist ideology and sustaining it. And even like the feminist movement, I've always said it was never about equality. The suffragists, all that, it was not about equality. It's about being equal to white men, being equal oppressors. And so when you see individuals like Renee Good who are willing to betray that, and you add the variable that is, of course, going to be weaponized by the right, that she was a queer woman. She is an affront to what is white supremacist patriarchy. She was proactively combating that through nonviolent, peaceful means, which, I'm not trying to sound like a Monday morning quarterback or anything like that, but we have to be honest about the risk of being nonviolent or taking nonviolent actions and moves of resistance in the face of this rabid state where they're just itching to make examples out of you, and they're telling these white nationalists and their compradors, they're telling them, you have immunity. We will support you and back you, and we will distort the truth. And they've always been willing to do that. We have to start recognizing ICE as just another police force, right? You hear a lot of liberals complaining about, well, why is it that ICE is on the streets, or why is it that the SWAT version of ICE is doing this? They shouldn't be here. This is just another police force. The Democratic Party has abandoned any idea of abolishing ICE. That's gone. Your heroes, the people that they're advocating for, the AOCs, all these individuals, abandon that because abolish is too extreme. So this is just another police force. This is the killing or the shooting, excuse me, in Portland, the killing out here, off-duty ICE agent, the killing of Renee Good. This is going to become normalized as just another form of police killing. When a Democratic politician takes over, you're going to start seeing the push for reforms. And suddenly, and I've been talking about this, what are liberals always crying about? The mask, the mask. Oh, they have mask on. I guarantee you that the reform that we're going to get is, oh, they can't wear a mask anymore. And we're all going to be applauding that shit. We're all going to say thank you. We're all going to claim that as a victory. But then what happens? Now you have to humanize them. Now you have to start pushing the narrative of their heroes as well, because that's what we do for the pigs. All these liberals that are, calling ICE the American Gestapo, because we always have to point to the Nazis, or else we don't have any understanding of what evil is. It's not like they were inspired by the US empire or anything like that. We had to say, oh, this is just like the West Bank disrespecting the people, the Palestinian people, who are experiencing this to a worse degree, when the Zionists were inspired by the US empire. We're the ones influencing all these other regimes and all these settler colonial projects, not the other way around. And so with that in mind, why is it that we have to call them the American Gestapo? Why is it that we're making the distinction of like, oh, okay, ICE is just too far? But the police, we're critical of them, but, we need them. They're necessary, this and that. So you see how these liberals are put in the situation where they're simultaneously trying to wag their fingers at ICE and this administration, while also saying, well, we also have to normalize and sustain certain other oppressive measures to maintain the status quo and their position of comfort and perceived safety. You're seeing how they're policing. And it looks bad. I can admit it looks bad. Homie showed up by himself, to burn the US flag at a protest. You got to read the room, homie. You got to show up with your homie. If you got friends, if you're not really, a fed, a cop or whatever, do not. And just in general, it's bad practice. I never go out anywhere. I stay in my home. I'm a good citizen. That's one of the most difficult things to avoid is trying to link up with the homies and be like, hey, when are we gonna do this? Are we getting one ride? What's going on? Sometimes you get a little itchy, and then you're just like, I'm just gonna go. It's the stupidest thing you do. Do not do it. Wait until you have somebody to go with. And if you don't have anyone to go with, then it's a moment of reflection to realize that you need to join an organization, because that's easier than making friends. That's difficult. So with that in mind, like, he shows up by himself to burn the US flag, and it's like, read the room, man. Too many times, again, that I've seen on video, because I would never, you go to these protests, and it doesn't have to be labeled No King's Day. The moment that you get a little rowdy, the moment that you step out of line, you're going to get pointed out at. Some of these, individuals here will inform the police, hey, this guy's causing trouble, because that's not how we protest here. We have a permit, please be considerate, So this who shows up, burns the US flag, and then gets immediately like fed jacketed, accused of being an undercover cop, accused of being a boogaloo boy, which I thought they were gone, but I thought they all joined ICE, to be honest, all these things. And look, he honestly could have just shown up and been like, there is no redeeming this. There's no reforming this. There's no saving this. This is what the American project is. This isn't something unique or out of the ordinary. This is what the American project is. This whole idea that liberals are clinging on to, well, these ICE agents aren't trained. Again, they're just another police force. How often do we hear the same bullshit excuse that we need better training for policing? Oh, we just need better training. Oh, no, that is what their objective is, to oppress us when we step out of line. Whether it's peaceful or not, it is to oppress us and to check us and to remind us of our fucking place. That's what they're there for. They're the state's attack dogs. And the fact that we don't recognize them as such, or that we allow liberals to continue to paint them in a different light and push this narrative of like, no, 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 it's just the way they're going about it. It's just a training that they're receiving. Oh, it's the people that they're recruiting. Sure, now this administration wants some fucking rabid dogs that will bite at the first opportunity. They still pick specific individuals that will abuse the power that they're given, that will create that distinction of, well, I'm a different type of human than you are, and I'm here to control you and keep you in place and in line. That's what they're there for. ICE is just another police force. When we talk about like, man, it makes me realize that, you know, you normalize a lot of things. I'm first generation. A lot of my family members are undocumented. I grew up knowing that they couldn't go down to San Diego because of checkpoints. I grew up knowing that. I grew up having to take, you know, family members that unfortunately their parents couldn't go with them to go visit family and then come back and be harassed by Border Patrol because, oh, you might be child trafficking, this and that. Well, we wouldn't have to be in this situation if it wasn't for this border, right? So it does kind of surprise you sometimes that people are waking up to the reality that undocumented people are forced to live like I was gonna say refugees, and that's true as well. But I always blank out on this word. But
Fugitives.
fugitives. Thank you so much. That is a reality. There is an underground aspect to it for sure. I mean, the cliche, one of the cliche jokes that we have is that, you know, you're working on your cousin's social security number, or go down to so and so and buy one off of whatever, things like that. That is very much a fugitive act. Like the idea of having to take somebody else's identity to survive, to work, to pay bills, to pay taxes. And the state knows this, but it's still, you know, the process that forced undocumented people to go through. A game that is being played. It is quite literally a fugitive lifestyle where they have two names. That does something to the psyche. To have to accustom yourself at work to be someone else. To live with the fear that at any moment somebody can point the finger at you. And everyone playing this collective game of a silence understanding that it's multiple people in a workplace like that. And whatever petty disagreements you might have, whatever anger might arise, that's a line that you never cross. Right? Pointing that out. Because then everyone loses. Now I'm rambling. Save me, Jerry. Save me.
Hey man, thank you. That was I mean, excellent opening. If I knew where to push the air horn button on this thing as I was being
I
made fun
seen
of
that.
by Cena the other day, then I would. But no, man, thank you. I mean, you said a lot. You kind of covered. We don't have to do anything else because you just sort of covered all of the topics that we wanted to talk about. But no, but all
Shortest stream
jokes
I've ever
aside.
done.
I tuned in yesterday and you were in the middle of talking about rom-coms and giving relationship advice. And I was like, what if
No,
I
I
just
wasn't.
like walked into it? Like, yes, you were.
That is a sneer. that will not stand.
Oh my God. No, it's great. Shout out to Deculturation. So I want to start with Venezuela. Go back to Venezuela for a minute, and we'll move through kind of everything that you talked about. I mean, on the one hand, like one of the things that I find most frustrating about like we can set like, well, maybe let's deal with this in a couple of different ways. So liberals, right? So let's start there. Democratic Party, right? I mean, they've been opposed to the Venezuelan project from the beginning, right? Like this is not um it is much further to the left than anything that they are comfortable with. They smeared Chavez, right? Called him all kinds of names. They, have only doubled down on that under the presidency of Nicolás Maduro. I mean, Obama was the one that named Venezuela an extraordinary threat to the United States, which then, kind of set the tone for the sanction regimes that were built on, which really And this is the most frustrating part about me of anyone who wants to characterize Maduro as a leader in Venezuela, is that if you are not at least naming US sanctions and having a discussion about the impact of those, then you're actually openly just being imperialist, like just straight you're just straight up displacing the blame of what US empire is doing to this small, not, I mean, small relative to the United States, large relative to South America, this country, right? Um, and certainly in terms of defense capacity and everything else, I mean, unfortunately, you know, countries just don't have the military might to be able to, engage in hot war or defensive war against, not on those kind of terms, not against, we saw it also in Gaza, right? Where it's like you can have rockets, you can have, some level of, air defenses and things like this, but I'm talking about all these helicopters and airstrikes coming in and drones and everything else, like, saw it in Iran as well too. Um, although Iran did get some nice licks in against the Zionist entity during the 12-day war for sure. Um, but the thing I wanted to say, so liberals, Democrats, they've always been against it, right? The only critique here is that Trump is doing it, that it's procedural, that is more of a military spectacle than they probably would prefer in handling these types of problems, right? It doesn't present the kind of international image that the Democratic Party prefers for, it would rather somebody else do that, right? It would rather, Israel do that for them, right? And then they can take, the hard end of the blame, and, they can hem and haw about whether they should provide them how many, J dams or whatever else they should provide them. Um, but all the while be complicit in it. And so, anybody, I mean, and you're right, like what's it called? The Miami baptism? Is that what it's called? Like, AOC, Bernie, Mamdani, they all have done it. And, really I mean, in some ways, Mamdani to me was the most despicable with this too, because it's like, you're not even running for national office, dude. Like, how many, you know, like Venezuelan or Cuban Guaisanos are in New York that compose a base that you have to placate like this? Like, what are you doing? I mean, maybe it's a media, strategy of like, oh, well, if I don't do this, then, but whatever. Like, I hate it, and I disagree with it. And I think that um, it does manufacture consent for exactly what happened. And it does then also create a kind of line that then folks within the DSA, folks who support you, then feel compelled to repeat, right? Or, wherever it comes from, right? It becomes this sort of line. And I guess just to add on, because this was the point that I was going to make before I got sidetracked by liberals, but Mamdani's kind of the nice bridge there, um, is that, the funny thing about this is that Venezuela is like the closest thing to a democratic socialist country in the world. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, they did it. They like that is essentially the greatest thing that DSA could ever imagine for itself, is that develop and build a popular base of, collectivos and communes and workers and unions, and bring together different strands, because there's a lot of different tendencies within Chavismo, of, from more anarchistic folks to Marxist Leninists to Maoists to, there's a lot of Guevaraism in Venezuela, which is not something we talk about much in the United States as a tendency, but it is. Um, there's all of that stuff, right? And it's obviously the base of like a long, like beautiful, Latin American, Marxist, socialist, history, right? That it was able to congeal through this movement with its own, of course, debates, contradictions, people don't like each other, like, that's what the world is, right? That's what the left is for sure. Um, and to see, like people like I mean, and I know it's not everybody in the DSA. Like there are folks within the DSA who believe that, you know, Maduro and Venezuela are projects to be absolutely defended and should be things that, the DSA is working to build greater solidarity with and so on and so forth, right? There are plenty of comrades in there that believe that. There's also these shitty social democratic whatever else, whatever tendencies they come from. Tariq Ali with his, I know he's not in DSA, but Verso editor with his like Trotskyite. I speak to my representative from the CIA who's in Caracas, and this is what he tells me. Like it, it's just disgusting, and it's really hard to watch. Because now a lot of these people, unfortunately, you're like alongside them in rallies and marches, and they have the like, neither Maduro nor Trump or whatever fucking, slogan they're coming up with, to kind of thread this invisible, needle that doesn't, needle that doesn't exist. Um and so yeah, I mean, this is the thing. And I think this is the part of maybe this is part of what we could talk about throughout all of this today is this opportunistic tendency that exists both within the social democratic forces, but also more broadly, obviously, we see it more clearly with the Democratic Party, right? Because now you have Tim Walz like trying to get big chested. You have the mayor of, Minnesota, and, they're like, get these people out of our state, let us prosecute them. Um, these kind of things. And yeah, the federal government's not going to allow justice to happen. So it has to be done through us. And so it becomes it's really unfortunate to see somebody, and I haven't it sounds like you've done a little bit more of a dive into Renee Good's like, posts or whatever else. Like I don't really know anything about what she believed other than there's a whole lot of people in this country who are doing the things that she's doing, right? Who are like, hey, I'll be connected in group chats or whatever with folks. I will mobilize when ICE comes in. I will, observe. I will, videotape. I will protest. I will try to block. Like all of these, whatever things are people are doing, right? That there's a lot of efforts and a lot of coordination that is going into this, and it there's a lot of beauty in that, there's a lot of potential to it, as you said, like, it is kind of in certain ways, like, there is an underground aspect, and these folks are in a certain way trying to defend that, like, I think that, as far as things political to be hopeful about in the United States, like, in this settler colony, in this empire, it is a lot of the folks that are engaged in that kind of solidaristic work, which I agree with you. Like it is a real expression of solidarity that crosses like various lines that people are told don't get involved in that. There's illegality involved. There's people that you're not they're not citizens. They're not the same race as you. Whatever barriers or ideas that people would throw up. And so yeah, it is quite awful that that would happen, but then, and the people have a right, every person has a right to be outraged about it. I do get frustrated on some level about the selective outrage of like, do people even pay attention to how many people ICE kills? Like, is this something, Border Patrol, like, are people really aware of the scale of that? And like, I get it. Like the video becomes a thing. It's another spectacle, and we can talk about that as well. Um, where it's like, whoa, like, I see that, I see what happened, and it becomes this like kind of spark as well as and it becomes something though then that the Democratic Party wants to latch on to in a certain way because there's already this tension. ICE is coming into largely Democrat run states and largely Democrat run cities. Um, and they know, the Democratic Party knows that this is not liked by their constituents. Um, and it's being done by Trump, so it becomes a kind of, a potential wedge issue, an election issue. And I agree with you in terms of, I mean, I don't actually think that any of them were ever serious about abolishing ICE. Like, I think that was just like basically a psyop, I really think that, I mean, even like one of the think tank guys, I think his name's Sean McKelvey or something like that, who was one of the people who like really popularized, he didn't come up with the term, of course, but popularized like saying it constantly and promoting it through social media and so on. Like, he worked for a liberal think tank, and then as soon as it got to a place where Democrats were elected, he literally stopped. Like, he never tweeted about it again. I could be incorrect about that, but that's my recollection, and feel free to correct me in the chat. But that's my memory of it. And so, I mean, it was again like I mean, talk about dogging operation, right? It was like, okay, let's take a demand from the left that we can couch in a kind of procedural discussion, because we could say, well, ICE was only founded 20 years ago. It's not an old force. We can have another way. I mean, they, even when you talk to like AOC about it, she was never really saying abolish it. It was basically like, let's reform it and make it a little bit different. um, you know, uh, so anyway, I've now rambled plenty myself, but yeah, I don't think that they were ever really invested in it. I think it was a thing of trying to get a certain amount of folks from the left invested in, which is something they did very poorly with the Kamala Harris campaign, by contrast, right? Like, they basically said, hey, all you lefties, all you people who care about ICE and Border Patrol and all of that, like, fuck you. Like, we don't actually care about your votes at all. And then, and all you people who care about Palestine and Gaza and, everybody else, just middle finger, right? And then they're like, oh, but you stupid, you know, YouTubers who convince people not to vote for her. And, yeah. So anyway, I'll shut up now, but yeah.
I mean, I think you wrap that around like perfectly. So, and I only say that so that you bring me back on. And no, but no, because I was like, dude, I'm gonna have to go back to Venezuela and then find myself way back. But you tied it up perfectly. I will say, for that, I think they got a little cocky in the sense of like, we're gonna replicate, the Obama uh, president or campaign presidential run, and they got overconfident because it's, well, she's a woman of color and, well, she's a black and a woman of color, so they thought that was going to be able to really influence enough people to forget about the shit that really matters. And so I think they were surprised that didn't work out, and you saw like in real time a lot of adjustments and plays be called in order to try and compensate for that. Even her meeting with was it what was the Palestinian like movement that was led by Rashida Tlaib's sister, the non-commitment or something like that? The
Yeah, it was
non-committed, right?
uncommitted. Uncommitted.
Uncommitted, that's what it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
she met
Yeah.
with them, and immediately the liberals were like, "See, this is a sign that she's, to the left of this issue of Biden, and that, there's hope, and if, we elect her, we'll push her to the left." And for me, it was always like, you can meet with anyone backstage. That means nothing. Not only that, how are you going to push her left if everyone with a conscience had already left the administration, and it was going to be Biden's administration going into, Harris's presidency if she would have won. So where are the individuals that would have pushed her left that were going to be in her inner circle? They didn't exist. So that made no sense to me. And of course, immediately after that backstage meeting, her team came out and said, "We will never endorse a total arms embargo on the Zionist entity." So the meeting's meaningless. Not only that, I'll never understand how Rashida Tlaib didn't run for president as a third party. I'll never understand that. That would have been, as far as electoral politics can go, it would have been a game changer if she literally would have said, "I'm simply running on ending the genocide." Can you imagine the support she would have gotten? I mean, she would have taken the state easy. Like, no, does anyone have a doubt that she would have won at least her own state, or not her own state? Excuse me, but um, Minnesota, right? Like, or Michigan, excuse me. I think that would have been a given that she would have, and that would have been historic for her to run as an independent to win a state like that. Um, but look,
I mean,
I might be off.
the question would be, it's money, right? Like, how
Right.
much could she raise? And then just the issue to get on ballots. It is a like,
I
as
don't want to get
somebody
pinned down on
who,
that. Sorry.
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
I hear you, and it would have been wonderful to see. There were third party candidates, obviously. She certainly more pop. Look, I have felt for a long time like if the DSA, or even if like a a large faction of the DSA were to abandon the Democratic Party and say, "Hey, look, we'll promote and we'll work with one of these other third party, whether it's Green Party or what." I know people have their critiques of all these things. I'm not, that's fine. Like, we set that aside for now. Like, trying to put your, whatever, 100,000 paper organizers, and I know it's paper members. I know it's like less than that in terms of people who are actually, engaged in coming to meetings and going out and canvassing and all of that. But like that type of infrastructure, it, could be very valuable to a third party effort. Um, yeah. Anyway, that's
No,
a whole
yeah.
separate discussion. But yeah, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
So,
cut you off.
well, the reason I brought that up is because even the organization of the uncommitted vote was just bullshit from the jump. There was no teeth behind that. And the people that Kamala did meet with were trying to appease or appeal to the people approving the genocide of Palestinians. And they were merely asking for stage time. They were merely asking for representation. You could pick who's going to be this person to speak. You're gonna edit our speech. All these things, compradors is what they are. Even if you want to say, oh, well, they're doing it for a good cause, and that, they were still compradors. The moment that you go and grovel, because they were literally outside of DNC on their asses asking for stage time. So already those individuals for me are like unserious characters, because it's, when has that ever worked? What are you doing here? When has that ever worked? What more did you need the Democratic Party to do to tell you, to demonstrate to you that they don't value your life, much less your voice and your input? When they're massacring in real time your family members, it never made sense to me. And it just, for me, it was just plain opportunism. Now, when it comes to like Harris and the Miami Baptism and AOC and Mamdani, you have to understand, especially with Harris and Mamdani, they know what's up. They're very educated, but specifically in these aspects, their parents, who, I mean, you think they didn't grow up in the dinner table talking about this stuff? It's not like they're like, oh, my parents working class, my parents were, immigrants that just didn't speak the language, they didn't understand, they worked too hard in order to engage with politics or be aware of the world. No, they grew up talking about this, and still they're engaging in it and they're complicit in it for their own, power. That's all it is. So for me, that's always an added layer of why I can't stand liberals, is that they know better. They know better. and still they align with empire. And you see that with for me, it's really frustrating because it's like, how is it that my broke ass is more educated than you are? And the reality is that I'm not. Is the fact that I'm not spineless, the fact that I'm not a coward, the fact that I'm not willing to compromise and turn away and pretend that, you don't hear the screams, that you don't see the blood, that you don't recognize the atrocities in order, to again gain power. In terms of the DSA, so what it is, and one of my issues with the DSA, one, they're not a political party, they're a political organization for the Democratic Party. I've met people that are doing solid work, and they all fall into this very. I'm trying not to be like condescending, but it is a sad reality where they all glorify these figureheads, whether it's Hassan Piker as a political streamer, and or Mamdani and AOC as political figures. They all glorify them, and it's very
But not everybody
telling.
in DSA does, though.
So okay, look, not everyone does, but the fact that you're in an organization, again, not a party, in an organization where you are being led by your nose by these figures, there's nothing the DSA can do to hold AOC accountable. There's nothing the DSA can do to hold Mamdani accountable. It's the other way around. Is if you still want me labeled as a DSA, politician, you're gonna let me get away with whatever it is I do. You can wag your finger, you can post a statement, but you're still not gonna separate yourself from me because you gain more from our association than I do from you. That's the reality. And so because of that, while I don't think that individuals, especially the ones that you're referring to, are going to start advocating, for the removal of the Cuban government, or that they were calling for the removal of Maduro because of that Miami baptism that Mamdani so willingly took. Um, I don't like this idea. I know Brianna Joy Gray kind of painted it as he was kind of forced to take it. For me, all that is performative. It's all theater. I'm like, well, I haven't really thought about them, this and that. It's like, you have. We know who your father is. You're very. What is your middle name, bro? Like, you're very self-aware of all this.
I mean, like,
So
if you hadn't thought about it that much, you're not going to say, "Oh yeah, he's a dictator." Like, what the
exactly.
fuck? Like, yeah,
So exactly, like
be like,
they know what's happening.
I don't know. I need to do some research.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty bold label to put on somebody as a politician. If you haven't thought about it much, just so willingly call somebody a dictator, an authoritarian, i- it's
Did,
not a thing.
no, absolutely. I mean, and it's interesting because I also see from folks, like, I get these comments on my YouTube channel lately. One of the interesting things about being on YouTube is people talk to you way more than they do when you just audio podcasting. Like, sometimes I love it, and sometimes I'm like, man, I kind of miss when I just made shit and people left me alone. But uh but like, one of the things I see is people actually, and it's coming from the left, right? People being like, well, actually, Maduro didn't go far enough. He's not a dictator, and he should have been more of one. Chavez should have been more of one. They should have gone after the opposition more vociferously. They should have totally expropriated their capitalist classes, et cetera, et cetera. And theoretically, I actually I mean, I agree with that largely. The problem is, how do you put it into practice, right? In the 21st century, right? And I think this is one of the big differences between. I mean, one, I get really tired of you know U.S. armchair quarterbacking of what you know entire socialist projects with tens or hundreds of thousands or millions of members in other countries in the world should be doing, as if there aren't internal debates, and as if there aren't, if they don't know things that we, if they, as if they don't know things, right? I'm not saying that right. They know things that we don't know. That's what I'm trying to say. Like they're aware of things within their own societies and in terms of what they're facing in terms of their enemies that we're just not aware of, right? Because we're not made aware of them. We're not in a position to be aware of that information. Um, so I get tired of that tendency in general. I think that it's again like it actually is related to the thing you said earlier of the kind of looking for the savior somewhere else, right? It's like, what are we doing? What are you doing? Like, how are you, and it even relates to like the people who are like, instead of doing X tactic, everybody should be doing this instead. And it's like a more escalated form of protest or whatever. I mean, I feel ethically very conflicted about telling people what types of risks that they should take, right? Um, I think people have to determine that themselves, and I think organizations ideally are the ones that should be determining that. But back to the thing, because you brought it up earlier, and I think it's worth stating, comparing Cuba and Venezuela is not they're as if they're the same thing is super lazy and just wrong, right? Because Cuba did follow a certain model. It did have a dictatorship of the proletariat, right? Like consciously so. And it does have democracy. Like I'm not going to sit here and like I think anybody that says, "Oh, it's dictatorial in this like negative authoritarian sense," and doesn't understand, the processes that Cubans go through to rewrite their constitution and the type of, like there is democracy, right? It's just not the liberal bourgeois democracy that we're told that everybody has, right? Or should have, right? And that they're somehow wrong because they operate on a different form, right? Um, there's a revolutionary project, and people are working through the institutions that they have built to carry that forward, right? And the biggest problem that it faces is the embargo, is the lack of recognition, the blocking of trade relations, the inability of them to get basic things that they need, right? That would allow them to further their own development, so there's that, right? And similarly with Venezuela, it's very different. Like you have capitalist classes, you have capitalism functioning within the country, you have, a giant oil industry, and but there are similar problems in that when you get sanctioned, when you get embargoed, that suddenly you can't get parts to fix your oil refineries and your oil wells and all that stuff, that infrastructure, and then you're not able to sell as much, and then your oil gets sanctioned, and then you can't, and so but there's no serious discussion. Like it makes me so angry to hear somebody be like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's wrong, but yeah, Maduro, like what? Like you don't know, you haven't spent 3 minutes to provide any additional context to the last 25 years. You're just repeating something that you've heard. Like, and that's the I sent you one clip, um, and I don't have it on me, but it was Owen Jones, right? Who is this like, uh, he's I think he's with Novara Media now. Folks can correct me in the chat if that's incorrect. But he's like labor left, right, in the UK. He also does a lot of wishy-washy bullshit with regard to Palestine. Um, and he began this discussion about the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president with something along the lines of, well, nobody would say that they support the Maduro regime, right? And like you think about all of the work that is done in that little tiny preamble. Nobody, like, well, apparently hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans that are in the street right now are nobody to you,
No,
right?
I mean,
Um,
literally, they view them as nobodies.
Yeah.
And if they view them as actual human beings, they view them as too stupid to know what's good for them, which is the epitome of a colonial mindset. That's what it is. And yeah, Owen Jones, I mean, dude, shout out to Ali, who's, you know, been after that fool's neck for like a while now, even as, you know, Drop Site News is over here doing this BS campaign to fund his legal fees, when the real people that need it, like Ali, aren't getting even a fraction of that attention because he happens to be brown. Even though he's been Electronic Intifada has been like the premier news outlet, and yet you have figures like Owen Jones being glorified when the Electronic Intifada has exposed this guy for years ago, and he's being glorified as a true voice because this, you know, liberal Zionist like Peter Beinart, who was just in Tel Aviv University, that he didn't know that it was going going against BDS, and he just wanted to, you know, open a dialogue. That's normalization. And once again, you've demonstrated that you're a liberal Zionist through and through. Same thing with Jon Stewart, Sam Cedar, all these figures, Bernie Sanders. They're liberal Zionists through and through. They just find different ways of maneuvering that. They're the vanguard of liberal Zionism. There's what they're hoping to survive and ride this shit out. He literally wrote a book, Peter Beinart, you know, who we are after we massacre Palestinians. Or I'm pretty sure that's the title of the book. It might as well be. And what's frustrating about that is, in terms of the criticism, though, is shout out to Why is the Dome TV. Why is the Dome TV? If you haven't subscribed to them, some of the best conversations. Just man, it's always a great time. And they just had Kahita Haynes. I'm sure I'm butchering your name. My apologies. The title of it is The Debate Over Marxism and Anti-Blackness.
Khadijah is her name. Yeah.
Khadijah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And look, if y'all hear me read out loud, you know that that is a constant. Se me traba la lengua.
Well, that would be Spanish, right? Khadijah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I'm trying to I'm battling, you know, the internal over here. But she had this great quote, and it's funny because I had watched it at work or listened to it at work. Then I watched it on stream. So I had already seen it twice essentially, and me and Wise Dome both reacted the same to that same bar that she dropped, where they say criticism is an excuse for vilification. You know, there's this constant criticism of, you know, Maduro. It's done to the point of you're trying to vilify him, but you're trying to. And she was speaking specifically on China, but nonetheless, non-European states and figures. You see European faces, whether they're in America or not. You see, you know, Bad Empanada, who a year ago was calling Maduro dictator, was claiming that Maduro had mass disappeared and mass massacred more people than his beautiful Argentina. Mind you, this was like the Rachel Dolezal of Latinos. He's a European born in Australia that moved to Argentina and claims to be Latino. But hey, he gave me the white pass, so I'm grateful because apparently I don't look like a bean, bro. Okay, first time in my lifetime that he claimed I don't look Mexican, or I'm not Mexican, so that's great. I've made it. But you see these figures use and weaponize criticism in order to vilify individuals. So, like the fact that you're calling him an authoritarian that stole the election, but he's keeping his political opponents like alive and being a thorn on their side, on his side, you know, trying to collaborate with the CIA and US imperialism. He's just keeping them around for aesthetics. How does that make any sense? Of course he would remove him if he was truly that authoritarian dictator. But he hasn't, because whether we like it or not, that's the current form of democracy that they're in. And thankfully, the Venezuelan people, you know, support the project that, oh, it's not the way that we want it. Oh, it's not the perfect fucking, you know, socialist state that we would implement if we just had the opportunity. Guess what? We do have the opportunity and we failed to implement it. We failed to organize and demonstrate that our ideas are so much fucking better. I'm sure Bad Empanada is keeping Melee up every night in cold sweats because of the organizing that he's doing in Argentina. I'm sure that's what's happening. It's like have
Um,
some humility.
I will just say, because this is something a point that I meant to make too, is that, doing a revolution in the 1950s, like you're seizing land, you're seizing probably gold bars, right? Maybe US dollars. Like, so part of what I'm saying too is like the notion of expropriating the ruling class and seizing their assets, right, is a lot easier to actualize in a certain way in the early to middle of the 20th century than it is now. And I don't see enough discussion of that. Like, what are
Mhm.
we doing? We're going to get their crypto accounts. Like, we're going to get their, that we're going to fly to Switzerland and expropriate the banks that they have their money hit. We're taking flights, um, to the Cayman Islands, right? So like capitalists are fucking smart too. Like they figure out how to make sure that not everything is sitting in their mattress, right? So that like, when the revolution comes, they have an escape plan, right? It's why they're thinking about fucking Mars, right? Like they're not, you know. So I do think too that there's a there's a there's a debate, right? I'm sure these discussions are had, right? But like, okay, we're gonna run the military up to these plantations, right? And seize the land of them and take whatever we can find and nationalize it or use it for these other purposes. Great. You think the sanctions regime has been bad based off of what? Off of, the US making up fake presidents and saying that they're actually the real president and, therefore, I mean, like, I don't think people even understand the type of shit that they've done to Venezuelan oil through Guaido, right? Like they announced a fake president. He swore himself in front of like five of his friends, right? And then he has to flee the country because he would have, nobody would have let him get away with this foolishness. Um, I mean, actually, he was allowed to get away with it for a while, right? But then, they say, okay, well, we will give you Citgo. Like the United States says, okay, we'll give you Citgo, which is the Venezuelan national oil company that operates in the United States. Like I don't even know how many billion, 7, 8 million. I think it was way more than that. But then he ends up, and like folks can dig into this. I haven't done all of the research around it, but basically he ends up selling it, right, on behalf of the Venezuelan government that they claim he runs on the super cheap to billionaires in the US, right? And so like it's just, I mean, the whole thing is a fucking laundering, extortion, you know. I mean, the US
No,
should
no,
be
no. But
sanctioned by everybody in the world for that shit.
Jared, Maduro doesn't know how to run a government. He's incompetent. We shouldn't be supporting, working class individuals, a bus driver, a union organizer that managed to demonstrate through hard work and dedication to the struggle. He's too stupid. We shouldn't trust him. We should look at fucking YouTube political commentators for the real answers. And it's like the disrespect of not just him but the people around him, right? Uh, this smearing imperial psyop propaganda that is being pushed on his VP, that somehow she betrayed him with no evidence. Uh, you're taking Trump's word? Is that what we're fucking doing now? Like this is where we're at. Where we're just believing Trump. Oh, she must have betrayed him because the Venezuelan military didn't fight back hard enough. How many more did you need? The fact that like everyone's so quick to say, oh, the U.S. military and the expanding, military industrial complex, this and that. Yeah, you just witness it. He just witnessed why they invest so much into it and why they dwarf the rest of the world, multiple times over. That's exactly why they shut down their power grid. Like, why didn't they fight back hard enough? And the Venezuelan people, like, both civilian and military, dying over this. And look, and I'll say this: if Maduro, I'll play along. If Maduro had some backroom deal, then he has blood on his hands and should be imprisoned for that, for the lives lost that day. If that's the case. But guess what? I'm not accusing him of mass disappearing and mass massacring individuals. And I'm not, I'm just saying, like, if that's where you're going and that's a conspiracy that you're going to push, then it's him and the VP and the entire administration that was involved in this that should, that have that blood on their hands alongside Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, and the rest of these barbarians. But we have no evidence for that, and it's so frustrating that we're even
Yeah.
forced to talk about it because you have so-called leftists pushing Donald Trump's lies.
Yeah,
And
I think there's
yeah,
oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to
I
say,
was
and
just
just
gonna
to
s okay,
be go for it, go for it,
you
go for
go.
it. So just to be clear, also we've seen the images of Flores, Maduro's wife, who was a political figure on her own right. And shout out, oh man, that conversation with Adriana Chavez. Wow, bro. I mean, that one and Bolshevik Baddie, that was a couple weeks back too. That one I was taking notes for. This one, I was just kind of letting it consume me because it was so informative. Both of them are amazing in their own right. Um, but
Thank you,
to
man.
highlight that Flores is her own person and has contributed to the struggle as well. And it makes perfect sense why the US also kidnapped her. Because if you leave her, if you look, you want to call me machista sexist, but like, scorn a woman like that, left that intelligence and that political know-how, prowess, like that is trouble that the US knew they had to also remove. And so with that in mind, the way that they assaulted her, you see the bruises on her face, and I believe I read something that she had injured ribs as well. Do you think that was part of the deal that Maduro struck? That his wife was going to get beaten? That his wife was going to get assaulted by the US military? Oh, I'm sure he shook hands with Donald Trump to make that fucking deal. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I appreciate you bringing it up. I honestly I struggle whether to even engage in, um somebody asked, like, what outlets are pushing that kinda stuff, and actually, most part I've seen it's, like, some fairly small, like, Substacks and, like, there's a couple of but I don't it's not outlets. Maybe you can name some names that, have shared it on a bigger level, but I haven't it's more that it gets shared and circulated online, than anything else. But what I would say too is that and I've appreciated the criticisms that I've seen from folks like Oli Vargas and, Camilla, Escalante and others around this particularly Western tendency and imperial tendency, right, to kind of like to have to one to like you are just conspiracy theorizing, right? And like I said this the other day, I mean, I kind of enjoy that myself sometimes. Like I don't but like you have to think about the stakes when you're engaging in that kind of shit. Like it's one thing for us to sit and to dig into the Epstein files or JFK or whatever. One, I've had people share good criticisms of that in general with me over the years, right? Which is like one, like it very often leads you away from class analysis, right, into this very like looking for the individual, bad guys who made this plot, right? And so it kind of in its own way, conspiracy theorizing by itself is a way to obfuscate and to let people off the hook, to let systems and structures off the hook, right? Um, and it's very clear in this case, right? Because if we're talking about Venezuela, there's something that we know that happened. And what happened is that Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped. We know that a bunch of places within Caracas and other regions of Venezuela were bombed. We know that over 100 people were killed, right? Like these are clear facts that we can work from and mobilize around, right? And so if we're thinking about it as organizers or people on the left, like our marching orders should be clear from those facts and we can proceed from them, right, to struggle. Now, of course, we are in the business of acquiring knowledge and learning, right? But like that's not what's going on. It's not people who are like, actually, I know that this occurred and this occurred and this occurred. It's like, oh, well, we're taking anonymous sources from the Washington Post or the New York Times, these, imperialist rags. We're taking what Trump says. We're taking the look on Marco Rubio's face, plus the, you know, the some of the statements of Delcy Rodriguez, but not all of them. Um, and we're going to create, and we're taking, the time of day that China appeared and left, right? And where you look like the guy and Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the yarn on the board. And look, I've looked like that guy plenty of times in my life. But part of what I think is like that there's real stakes to that, and engaging in that type of behavior right now, it displaces blame and causes confusion, um, to a whole bunch of people. It leads people to take lines and political stances, or to just step away from the thing of like, well, I don't know too much. Actually, there might be some other shit going on here. Maybe I don't want to get involved, you know, and it's really despicable. I mean, to your point about like if it did, yeah, I mean, my main thing around all of that is, Venezuela has millions of people and it has political projects and it has, you know, folks, even if it's something that's going on within the highest, levels of government, that is up for the Venezuelan people to determine and to handle, right? And it's not us in the United States, in the country that just our tax dollars literally just paid for this traumatic and devastating operation, and who's holding their president currently within the dungeons of our country, right? Like, it's just not our place to engage in and spread that kind of disinformation and misinformation, which it is. Like, it is not, nobody can point to it and say, like, I actually know that this is what's going on. It's like, no, this is what you are, writing up on your back of the envelope of what could be a possibility based on, you know, it's like the same thing as people watch fucking movies and do the Easter egg thing and then say, "Oh, this is secretly about, you know, this is a reference to, whatever." Like it's like, no, it's not serious. And it is actually, I think the lack of seriousness and the lack of care that is engaged with, right, does again show that like where this stuff is coming from.
No, I love that about the Easter eggs, like just the way that Hollywood has just brain rotted some individuals. I will say that it's uh the reason why I also did want to bring it up is not just being petty, but even uh uh your homie Jose Ceja in his podcast, which I do sincerely love. I really do sincerely. Soberanía was talking about, you know, they went out of their way to bring that up. Like all these predominantly, white European, Western American leftists that are immediately, conspiratorial. And I do think that it's like, it is that like you need that, Jack Ryan, Tom Clancy type of fucking entertainment in order for you to truly be invested in this. The other thing that's really frustrating is like, why would you expect or why would you give the Donald Trump, administration the benefit of thinking that they would be humble enough to compromise and not just say, no, we're gonna fucking do it. I mean, the way that Stephen Miller like talks, like, what more do you need if you're gonna be looking for clues to understand these people are like, no, we're just gonna do it because we can, and they can, and they always have been able to. And that's the whole liberal approach of like, oh, we can, but we're better than that. That's what these people are asking for. These people are fundamentally asking for a more restrained, more civilized oppressor. That's why they're so upset at the FBI because they're like, that's not a competent FBI. We want a competent FBI. Why the fuck would you want a competent FBI? Put that fucking piriqueado. That fool's like always
Fucking
fucking wired, bro. I want that fool
yeah,
there.
that's the James Comey. This is the James Comey effect, right?
Yeah.
It's like the James Comey welcome to the resistance moment that just fucking broke liberal brains forever. I mean, I think also one thing I would say too about this is that I do think that Gaza and watching this genocide unfold and having the difficulty in being able to make sense of it because it just
Mm,
seems so fucking like I mean is like it doesn't seem it is so barbaric and seems to operate unrationally in a certain way, right? And people can't make sense, right, of why does the US government back this and all of this, that this also unfortunately can lead people into this conspiratorial analytical space because there is so much that is hidden, right? And I mean, Orasami Burton talks about this quite beautifully in the need to engage with conspiracy theory on a certain level, right? Because your enemy is always plotting, right? And so like I do get that, right? Like that they will lie to us, right? And they will do psyops and they will do all of these other things. But we do have to maintain, and I think Orasami Burton is a good example of this in terms of how he does his scholarship, right? Of like it has to be rigorous. We have to have facts. We have to actually be able to connect the dots, right? And in movements, right? If we're talking about movements, they do have to think about some of these things, but we don't need to propagate, like rumors and because it does it like the United States is engaged in psychological warfare all the time, right? And it's part of the critique that both you and I have about all these various sectors of the media, right? Is that, I mean, media is propaganda fundamentally. That's what it is, right? When we do it, we're engaging in a specific form of it. And when other people are doing it, they are, right? And, um, you know, you have to be very careful that what you are doing is not benefiting empire's propaganda, right? And like that type of conspiracy theorizing absolutely is. It is. It just there's no way around that.
yeah. It's interesting how connecting that to the Zionist project and the genocide of Palestinians, even like Emma Vigeland, and I call these individuals, counterinsurgent propagandists. The Hassan Pikers, the Sam Cedars, now with Bad Empanada calling for the recolonization of Greenland that is predominantly Inuit, which I could touch on that a little bit later. Like to be advancing, you know, the empire's propaganda makes you complicit in it. And you see, I don't know, man, it's funny how for a while I was talking about Zog, right? The Zionist occupied government being a relic of these, very post Vietnam, very militia heavy, combating with the ATF, white supremacist movement, and how that's kind of been erased from like history, which is, I don't know, maybe I'm
We
sick in the
did
head. I find
we did an episode on that.
it's so entertaining.
The the
So,
conversation we had with Two Black and Rasul
mhm,
Moat on white supremacy revisited, like we went
mhm.
into that, and yeah. But anyways, continue. I mean that
No,
has been
it
erased. You're
is.
right.
It's so fascinating. It's been memory hold. I mean, when people talk about Waco, they talk about the call. I know there was a like a mini series about it, but it's not. I didn't watch the miniseries, so I don't know the way they portrayed it. But in a larger sense, when it comes to the left, it's not recognized as these were like separatist movements that were obsessed with this idea of Zog, of the Zionist occupied government. That if we simply remove the Zionists, and for them, Zionist was a broad catch-all term for like for Jewish people, like in a true anti-Semitic way. And for them, like once we remove them, then we'll have the Christian white nation that we were promised. Then things will be correct. And you see how even Emma Vigeland from the Majority Report pushes that line when this whole conspiracy theory of like, oh, well, Trump just met with Benjamin Netanyahu. So he must have been the one asking him to take out Maduro. Do you think that it is necessary for Benjamin Netanyahu to tell any US politician, president, to take out Maduro? You think that was like the straw that broke the camel's back? That was the tipping point where like, oh, you know what? All right, Benjamin, I got you. Just for you. A New Year's fucking gift. What are we doing here, bro? Like, and so it is weird seeing how, and mind you, she accused me of being anti-Semitic because I dared question their
I remember
position of
that.
Israel having the right to exist, and bringing up Norm Finkelstein, who is a liberal Zionist through and through, in comparison to Ilan Pape and Jeff Halper and all these other liberal Zionists. And so for her to be pushing this line that I've seen online as well of, well, Benjamin Netanyahu was there speaking to Trump. And again, like you're saying, all these Easter eggs. And it's like, it's not a materialist approach to this. Like you're not being an adult right now. Like you want this fan fiction to occur. And it's like, why don't we just work with the information that we have now? Why do you need to add all this extra fucking, we say salsa en tus tacos? Like, why do you need to add all this shit to it? There's more than enough fucking meat on the plate for us to consume and analyze and understand what's happening. Like, there's no, I don't know why you need to create a fantasy in order to entertain yourself, in order to garner more clicks, in order to, I don't know, take this as serious. I'm not sure what it is or what need there is for that. The shit is serious enough. It is more than profound enough what is occurring. And shout out to, I'm gonna butcher his name, Prince Shakur. I don't know if you've seen his
Mhm.
work. Oh man.
I mean, I know who he is. Yeah.
We had just read part of his. I'm trying to do my best not to read, everything somebody puts out in order to entice people watching my streams to go and read it for themselves, because too often, not just the parasocial relationships, but kind of like hand holding occurs of like, oh well, if you want to be educated, come watch me. It's like, no, 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 like you have an obligation to read the shit on your own. And I always go out of my way to read some of like the sub headlines to be like, I don't know how you can resist reading this, because this sounds like an enticing piece. I try my best to try and like trick and encourage people to do the reading, the road. I call it road work. Nobody likes to hit the pavement and go off running, but you have to do that if you want to improve your cardio, if you want to be a better athlete, whatever, be healthier. Guess what? You have to sit down and read some shit sometimes. And thankfully, there's great writers like him, who was just talking about, this new operation in Latin America. And it's like, that is more than enough to talk about without this conspiracy of Maduro's, handpicked selected VP betraying him, and Benjamin Netanyahu being the one to actually order the hit. Like, I think we've been too long on this, but yeah, it's frustrating.
It's yeah, and it is frustrating, and I think part of it also. I mean, unfortunately, I think it's good to do somewhat of a materialist analysis around why this occurs, right? Which is like, on one level, I mean, there's all the things that we've already talked about, right? In terms of people's positionality and how unserious and all that. But like, we have no journalism in this country anymore. Like, as bad as the major newspapers within this country have always been, there did used to be a greater investment in investigative reporting by journalists who had sources, right? Who would actually like delve into it and uncover atrocities and things that were done by whether it's US corporations or the US military, right? I mean, you literally have it at this point where I think it was both the New York Times and the Washington Post, don't quote me on that, but at least one of them had the story that they were going to invade Venezuela that night. And
Mhm.
the government said, hold it, and we'll give you more for your exclusive, right? So it's holding on to information on behalf of the US government, which totally shows the role of imperialism, which, like, shout out to like New York war crimes and all the folks who are like just boycott, these papers at this point. Like, they are a part of the imperial apparatus and psychological warfare. And I totally agree with that, right? And I don't mean to like romanticize the role of these things at earlier points in history because they have always done that. But it is true that the journalism in this country is increasingly, under like big tech, high level corporate control, state control, and that there just also isn't the investment. Right, and that this is part of where you get to it, right, where I think it is you can actually really talk about it and materially. There is not the investment because doing investigative reporting is expensive. You have to pay multiple journalists to go to places, to meet with people, to sometimes spend weeks, months, even years on stories to actually connect all of the dots, right? And we live in a clickbait, internet-based media environment, and the same people you're talking about when you talk about Vigeland, et cetera, like, and us to some extent, right? Like, just to be honest, right? Our brains get saturated with, and we're given analytical data all the time, right? Of like, okay, well, what thumbnail, what title, what 30-second to 90-second clip, um, you know, what connection can I make to catch the audience's attention? What little fig leaf can I put out there, whatever the right term is? That's probably not it. Um, uh, what can I do, right, to entice people in to this story? And headlines are a great example of this just historically. Like, anybody who's ever written articles, I have, I don't know if you have, but like, um, you don't usually control your headlines as an author.
Mm.
And the editors do that, and sometimes you can debate them. Like, they'll put some shit out and you say, like, that headline fucking sucks, bro, like, can we please change it? um but very often you don't really get any sort of input around it at all, and you have to fight for any input around it because they will just create it. And then, unless you're gonna like call them up or, email them or whatever, there's no way it's gonna change. Um, and so what I'm saying is that there's just a lot of ways that I think also the conspiracy theorists, right, are in some ways trying to fill in for
Mm.
something that used to be. There used to be people who would look into shit, right? Who were paid, who had the resources, because it takes resources to actually do it well, right? But if I run a Substack, I don't have the resources to actually do it well. I'm not doing FOIA requests and fucking, calling up people in the Pentagon to see who will talk to me, and, going at the press junket and schmoozing with, some senator who seems upset about something that happened to see if he could tell me something that was read out in a intelligence briefing, or, like, cuz that's what it takes, right? To actually, you have to develop sources, relationships, etc., right? And so nobody is doing that anymore because nobody has the resources to do that anymore. And people are left trying to make sense of something that doesn't seem to make sense to them, And like, so I still think that we have a responsibility to do better and that people should not do that shit. But I also think that there's a gap that people are trying to fill in, I think, in some ways, from this loss of, you know, just a society that is even willing to put any resources into investigation.
No, I mean, look, I think that is a very understanding and very compassionate, sympathetic um, approach to it. I just think these people are fucking opportunists that want to sensationalize and want to grab attention and want to feed that fire of conspiracy theory. I mean, I think they looked at the Michael
All of that.
Parenti. Yeah, they looked at
Yeah,
Michael
there's all
Parenti
of that.
talking about conspiracy theories and they just ran wild with it. And it's like, all right, I'm sure, yeah, like without question, the lack of actual journalism. Although I would push back a little bit and say, how much of it have we really had in terms of not the inner workings of the empire, but actual imperial expansion has always lagged behind in comparison to what's happening internally, mainly because both political parties are in alignment more often than not, uh, with what the empire needs to do externally. And I just want to make one correction. Prince Shakur is a YouTuber who's been around for quite a minute, has solid content. But I was thinking about Prince Capone, and he has a piece on Black Agenda Report that came out on the 17th of December of last year, titled "Southern Spear: The American Pull and the Recolonization of the Hemisphere." That is just, dude, it is outstanding, outstanding, and I encourage anyone to read that and check that out. His work is, I became an immediate fan of his. Just, you asked me if I've ever written an article. No, that's some nerd shit. I don't do that. I'm way too cool. No, no, I haven't. I'm not, I don't have that ability, or at least I haven't quite mastered it yet. Um, but yeah, I cannot recommend this enough. It is just an amazing, amazing article, and he's got a couple more that I've started looking at that are very, very thorough, and I just really appreciate the way that his mind works and the way that he, writes it down to make it digestible. More than anything, I always, joke around that like I love reading Stalin because he makes me feel less dumb about shit. But you got to be able to speak to the working class, people like me that may struggle with my limited attention span, to say the least. But
I appreciate you bringing that up. I've had so many people over the years say that of like, look, if you want like the PowerPoint of dialectical materialism, like go read Stalin. Like that like yeah, like one of the most I will just leave it there. I'm not gonna get into
yeah,
him today. Uh but like if you want accessible Marxist theory,
Mhm.
like that's what he was trying to do.
Yeah, and so yeah, we'll step away from that fucking landmine, and I'll just add, again, encourage everybody to check out that article. And so I kind of hinted at it before, but speaking about journalism and the figures that we unfortunately have now, with somebody like Ryan Grimm, who has been obsessed with defending the image of Graham Plattner, who is literally playing down a white supremacist iconography. Um, all these things, who has covered for the Democratic Party and spreading misinformation in terms of Jayapal was the one that said that if the so-called squad dared to try and use their political power as a collective, as a bloc, to advocate for a vote on Medicare for all during a fucking global pandemic, that McCarthy could become the Speaker of the House, which is just impossible unless Democrats voted for McCarthy. Like, that's the only way that it could have happened. And Jayapal started this lie, and Ryan Grimm did not offer any pushback to it, which allowed Cenk Uygur and Sam Seder to also spread this lie, because now they could reference Jayapal, and now they could muddy the waters. That conversation was so long ago, but it does two things. One, it demonstrates how even during a global pandemic, the Democratic Party will not fight for your healthcare rights. Even during a global pandemic, the Democratic Party will not fight for your healthcare rights. I'm out here in California. I've known this. Like, everything is Democratic, everything's blue over here, except like Orange County gets a little tricky, but they don't give a fuck. So even if we had a government on the federal level that was all blue, all Democrats, you are still not going to get the shit that they promise you. It's just not going to happen. But also, almost more importantly, in a sense, when we talk about journalism and who we trust, it demonstrates that Ryan Grimm and individuals like him are more concerned about maintaining access and pushing back or actually holding politicians accountable to the truth. Later, I want to say a year or maybe a couple months later, he admitted that he should have pushed back on that false claim. He was speaking to Brianna Joy Gray, and it's like, well, it's a little too fucking late now. And just as the Democratic Party, there's blood on their hands for refusing to provide I was going to say Medicare, but just medical services in general. I hold certain non-political figures like Ryan Grimm accountable for that as well, blood on their hands for refusing to do their job of journalism and advocate for the truth when you know that lies are being spread in order to cover for the Democratic Party's not incompetence, but allegiance to capital, right? So with that in mind, a couple months back when Donald Trump was first talking about taking over Greenland and colonizing Greenland, Ryan Grimm came out and said that it heartened him to hear that because it meant that somehow magically, as if the empire couldn't do multiple things at the same time, that by focusing on Greenland and colonizing Greenland, then the war in Ukraine would stop. And because Ukraine has more people, that means that because Greenland has less people, that if some of them die, then it's less people dying. So it's okay in comparison to Ukraine. It was like this weird math that he was doing of the lesser of two slaughters, I guess. But in reality, is if you have a smaller population, it's more devastating to lose people in general than a larger population. It just so happens that Ukrainians are, they're European, so he might value that a little bit more, although he doesn't say that outright. All I'm getting at is that it forced me to look at Greenland and the indigenous Inuit population that makes up the majority of the population there. And there's this whole thing where they have the highest rate of suicide. And it's not because of the climate. It's because of the colonization that they went through. We're watching a documentary where just like how they did to brown women in LA, just how they did to brown and black women in Puerto Rico, the forced sterilization of women also occurred in Greenland. And you have entire generations of Inuit women who were not able to give birth because they were unaware that they were, given contraceptives or that the state implanted contraceptives in them without consent. And because they were left long enough, it left them infertile. That is forced sterilization. That is eugenics. That is a form of genocide. And so you had Ryan Grimm saying that, oh, it's okay if the U.S. recolonizes Greenland, as if the Inuit population, the indigenous people there, haven't already suffered enough by the European colonization. And now you have Bad Empanada literally saying, hopefully, literally asking for, essentially praying that the U.S. does colonize Greenland, because in his mind, oh, they're just Europeans, because you don't bother to actually research and look at the details and realize, like, no, these are colonized people. And for whatever reason, people call him a third worldist because he LARPs online. Homie, he went to Argentina because I've been saying it, he dodged the fate of coming to the U.S. and really demonstrating how a revolutionary acts. You want to yap online, you had the opportunity to come here, but instead you want to be a gentrifier, which is a modern day colonizer, and benefit from the weight that you were able to carry as a European into a Latin American country. And he's over here advocating for the U.S. to colonize Greenland. And what I'm trying to get at, the larger non-petty aspect of this, is that these figures that people turn to, whether it's Ryan Grimm, whether it's Bad Empanada, and when they get their politics from and they trust them, are still advocating for colonization, are still normalizing the colonization of indigenous land and people. And the issue with that is, if that's who we're turning to, then we're going to fall into a Eurocentric mindset that, oh, well, some colonialism is fine as long as it's, the right circumstances, the right people, the right situations. And before you know it, you're just like Mamdani. You're excusing and literally labeling, Nicolás Maduro a dictator, and essentially giving a stamp of approval to his removal and the subjugation of the Venezuelan people, which is what Trump and Stephen Miller are calling for. They're saying, no, we're going to run Venezuela. Homie, you're going to get run out of Venezuela. You don't want to quagmire with that because you have a pueblo who is invested in the Bolivarian Revolution, in Chavismo. They have self-respect, something that we in a lot of sense lack understanding of. Like, this is a pueblo con orgullo. They have pride that they know that they will go out swinging. There is no way they're putting boots on the ground and not immediately running back with their tail between their legs. But apparently, not enough Venezuelan lives were lost for people not to dive into conspiratorial, talk. Like, how many? How the real question here is, how many Venezuelans needed to die for these opportunists not to be pushing conspiracy theories? Because that's what it sounds like to me. Not it wasn't devastating enough, and it's so frustrating too because some people, especially liberals in the Democratic Party, are praising Donald Trump where he shouldn't have done it, but it was an effective, smooth operation. And that's just encouraging him to continue these type of programs. Is the reason why Obama loved droning individuals, and that's why Trump was like right there with always bragging about Soleimani because it's clean, it's efficient. If we would have had Harris and Hillary prove this, in order to get into the boys club, in order to like demonstrate that your female anatomy isn't going to hold you back from being as ruthless as the men, they got to get their hands dirty. And you saw that with Harris saying we're going to have the deadliest military. You saw this with how Biden was pushing this draconian border bill. That look, what we're seeing now with ICE. Imagine if it would have passed and Donald Trump would have had the complete control of the border. Like, it just would have been catastrophic. But that's what Democratic Party. That's what they do. They lay the groundwork for the Republicans to abuse power like they haven't before. All I'm getting at is that there is no question that Harris would have definitely, if not invaded Venezuela, invaded some country, because it's patriarchy requires this of women to demonstrate that they can be just that they can hang with the boys. That's what it is. It really is. And I mean, she was laughing on air about what happened to Gaddafi. What is it? We came, we saw, and he's dead. Shamelessly. That's the type of language and bombastic language that they wag their finger at Donald Trump. They wag their finger at Donald Trump for speaking that way. But then Hillary can do that and laugh her ass off. And everybody's like, oh yeah, she's presidential. She's got the grit
Girl
that we need
boss.
in office. Girl boss. Kamala Harris would have been, when I say force, it's more of an expectation.
It's the same. I mean,
That they're more than happy to
I think
reflect.
yeah, and I think Obama was, to some. I mean, I don't say this to excuse anything that he did, but I think that all of the expansion of the military stuff he was consciously, trying
AFRICOM?
to, prove up his own credentials as, the commander in chief of empire, right? And yeah, folks saying they wish that Jared Ball was here to hit the Funk Flex clip for bars. So yeah.
Yo,
Uh
when you mentioned capturing their crypto, I need like somebody to paint, because fuck AI, an image of like Dr. Ball leading the march to acquire the crypto, the rich and powerful.
oh, that would be beautiful.
Uh,
Um yeah, what was I gonna say? Anyways, appreciate it. Appreciate all of it. Let's go back. Do you want to
yeah.
go to Renee to talk more about Renee Good? We kind of
Yes,
touched about
please.
that briefly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, can I just say one thing about Venezuela before we
Yes,
move on?
of course.
Because man, look, I'm the type. Something's wrong with my head. I'm honest about my shortcomings. I'll watch straight fight videos, reels nonstop because I think it's ridiculous the amount of damage that we could do to each other. Um, but Tariq, as you mentioned, and VJ Prashad, like that beef online. I don't know if you've seen that. It's because I have my criticisms of VJ Prashad, but it's man, I was just having a good time watching that where VJ was like, I didn't even know it was blocked. And I was like, bro, I just love that. No matter how intellectual we are, no matter what academic positions we are, like, we're just, we're just people. We're petty. We're like, we're throwing jabs at each other. I love seeing that. It's pleasant. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was trying to look actually real quick. Yeah, he did. I mean, this is Vijay Prashad has published or been a part of 4 different books on Verso books, right? So, like, how petty is that for fucking Tariq Ali as editor to, like,
Fuck.
fucking block one of his authors and editors too?
Love that
Um,
shit, bro.
I yeah, every day I get more and more antagonistic towards Verso books as an entire entity, although, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, I mean, that Tariq Ali tweet is just so irresponsible. Like, I mean, and it rises to the level where we actually do have to, and here we go. I'm going to delve into conspiracy theorizing a little bit, but you do have to then question, right? Because there's sort of 2 possible outcomes there, which is one, that he's irresponsible and stupid, right? Well, maybe 3. We'll give 3 possible outcomes: irresponsible and stupid, working with the US deep state in some way to undermine the Venezuelan project among the left, or part of a tendency that is so compromised by its sort of Western Marxist principles that it does the work of the deep state without even
Mm,
really, interrogating that that's what it's doing. Like, it believes its own logic enough
mm.
that it just operates on autopilot in a certain way, um, in a sort
You're
of,
trying to get Rock
you
Hill
know,
on, aren't you?
yeah. Well, no, I mean, Rockhill will.
Nice.
I have the book. I will.
Uh,
Rockhill, I would love to have back on. We've had him on
yeah.
a couple times. Um, but yeah. Anyway,
No, I agree with that
so
if
Renee,
it wasn't for his history. Like he's been in the game long enough to where I'm sure he's made those connections to push certain lines. And I was talking about this and bringing it back to the protest in Minneapolis is sometimes you don't need infiltrators if the actual organization or whatnot that is set up from the inception is already part of the establishment, is already a counterinsurgent, um, operation to begin with. So it does put into question Verso in general and anything that he's been involved in. And also, like I always say, like maybe it's ages of me, but it's like, how'd you make it so long if you were actually like part of the left? Because a lot of people don't make it and definitely don't have the popularity. Uh, yeah, like I said, there's a difference between old people and elders. I think you're muted. Yeah.
thank you. I'm supposed to read these out now, also for accessibility purposes. Tariq
Mm.
Ali is the epitome of "That's nice. It's time to go to bed now, Grandpa" meme. Yeah, time to go to the bottom of the ocean now. Yeah. Anyway.
No, I love the one where Mr. Krabs is, contemplating that he's getting old and he's crossing the street, and out of nowhere, like next to him is a Boy Scout being like, "We're almost there, Grandpa," like helping him cross. So I think there's a difference between old people and elders, and shit like that demonstrates where he stands. But that's just me being petty. When I saw that, I was like, "Oh, all right, some brown on brown violence, a little different than what we're used to." But
Oh, and then yeah, I don't know if you saw when he and Ali Vargas went back and forth, but uh Tariq Ali and Ali Vargas went back and forth, but he actually he Tariq Ali called Ali Vargas racist, right? It was
oh
just
yeah,
like
that was
or something
great.
like he was like, I don't know if you're so racist or if you just don't know how to read or something like that. Like it was like some,
Yeah, because Ali told him
anyway.
like, "Bro, don't talk about Venezuela when you don't know about it." He's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're so racist that you assume because I'm Indian that I wouldn't be capable of understanding it," something like that. And I'm just like, "Oh, bro, you hang around too many white people to be pulling that shit out that quick. That's a Karen move, bro. Like to just be like, uh,
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because Verso has published a number of books on Venezuela
mm,
during different phases of the revolution, but I do think it's interesting that as things got more difficult as sanctions started coming in, as people started to really challenge the project, as President Maduro faced a lot of challenges that I, I I'd have to go back and people can look, but I think they pretty much stopped publishing on it at that point. And you know, presses like Monthly Review Press, and others have continued to. But yeah, anyway,
It's always
let's
easier to
do.
support like oh, the past. Oh, they were good then. Things I can support what they were doing back then, but now, now when it matters, when it matters, I have to hold back or remain quiet on it. It says a lot.
Well, that's the thing too about movements and about revolutions, right? Which I think is important for people to understand is that there are periods with a lot of these projects where they can actually push through gains, right? Because the old system was so oppressive to the masses, right? That you can redistribute, you can create
Mm,
policies, you can redistribute some land, you can get the housing project that they undertook, healthcare, like you can make gains, right? In real terms. You can nationalize oil profits for a period of time and really pump money into, the masses, right? In certain ways, support them. But at a certain point, it becomes about defending your sovereignty and your ability to just maintain. And sometimes even things are going to be rolled back, right? And look, people in countries have every right to battle against what they see as neoliberal policies or rollbacks, right? That's an internal dialectic that I believe in masses for challenging their own governments to do better and all of that, like in global south context. We have to be very clear and careful that that doesn't mean that we as people in empire are against that state project now and we are supporting the removal of their president, right? And that's where I just think there's disagreements on the left on some of this stuff, but I just think that's part of it too, is that like, Chavez was there for the kind of honeymoon period to a certain extent of the revolution, and it was easier to write about that and the power of that project. He was also just an incredibly compelling,
yeah.
charismatic, fucking brilliant dude, right? Like Maduro, diehard Chavismo, right? Chavist, right? But like, he's a bus driver. He's been in the party. He does all the like. He doesn't have the same level of charisma and
Mhm.
everything else, right? Doesn't mean that he's not capable, as a leader of a project, right? And it's not our job to fucking determine that, right? But anyway,
No, I
so
I I
yeah, I
do
think
wanna say, like sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying, I think like, something like Verso, like if you look at their tracing of it, like they were comfortable with that first half. When it got to that second half, they lost their comfort in
Mm.
publishing and talking about it. Like,
That is underplayed about just, the natural charisma that certain figures have that makes it easier to support them, be a little bit more forgiving. I think Chavez, like, man, when Chavez, like, and I try not to do this romanticize or glorify figures, but it's just kind of trying to be objectively truth, where it's like, the two people that you have above you right now, it's like it's funny to me because like Chavez, when he would smile, like that smile lights up a room. His eyes disappear. He had the cachetes, just all that is like it's so heartwarming. And you could tell that he loved life. Like there was something about his presence, but also the way that he spoke and the way that he delivered a speech was captivating. Like you can practice at all that, but some people are just naturals on the mic. Some people are just naturally meant to be on stage, and it makes sense that he had that in him so much so that he led this shit in a lot of ways. And you kind of need that in a political figure when you're starting things off. Just for the reality of Malcolm X, handsome motherfucker, bro. Like, excuse me, sorry, a handsome, sorry. Like, it's just attractive, and that matters a lot. Like, it really does. Even things like height play such a huge role in how people perceive you. Like, let's not pretend that, like, my I saw this image of Maduro or video slap boxing on national TV with like some random Venezuelan dude, and it's like, oh, we would have seen more of that, But very obviously, you could tell that because of his background, he just clearly was more comfortable around other working class people than being buttoned up and around the cameras and all that stuff. So because whenever I have seen clips of him with just average people, like it's a different side of him comes out that really we shouldn't be too invested in, but just to say that how people are perceived does matter. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we transition, I mean, free Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores. Solidarity to the people in Venezuela struggling. Also, as I said to Andreina the other day, like, just condole. Like, I don't even know the right word to say. Like, and I felt this way a lot over the last few years of just like it's. I don't have the words to express my rage, but also um my heart goes out, right? Is like the best that I can say to the people, like deal with the trauma of fucking US imperialism. And I think that we sometimes we can talk about these things in very kind of like, okay, this happened. And like there's a certain way that we normalize it. I think unintentionally in terms
Mhm.
of because there's so much violence that the United States and its government and its military and its police forces are involved in on a day-to-day basis that we don't spend the time to think about like what is the impact of that violence on the daily lives of the people who wake up at fucking 1 a.m. with sirens going off, bombs going off, and have to deal with, their president being fucking kidnapped in the middle of the night by an empire, right? I mean, that shit is, I can't imagine the trauma of that, nor can I imagine the trauma of trying to survive in Gaza for the last couple of years or any of the other, you know, I don't have that experience, right? And I don't know what that's like. And I don't want to become numb to it or to normalize it in a way to not sit and try to spend a little bit of time, you know, just trying to contemplate that a little bit because
Mhm.
it's fucked up and it's deep. And the one of the things I guess that connects Renee Good, so that we can make a transition here, as well as what has happened in Venezuela. I mean, there's multiple things that connect it, obviously. I mean, there's the way that, ICE and this way that this administration politicizes around this, um, is largely built on the back of this argument about Venezuelan migration, which they fucking caused through their sanctions regime. And so you create this cycle of where push people to flee a country that you are, contracting its economy and literally to their terms to make the economy scream. And then when they get here, the ones that make it that journey and don't get killed along the way or die along the way, um, then you try to go after them with your fry core. Um, and you know, Renee Good is a casualty, is a loss in that flow of violence. And I mean, it's interesting because it's not a body cam video or a dash cam video. It doesn't come from the state, like many actually of the videos that have caused rebellions and mass protests and so on. It's taken from a cell phone. Um, but there is something too about the spectacle and the intent to discipline people through these acts of just grotesque violence. You know, this guy who shot her was an Iraq War veteran. So anybody who says he needs more training, he's had fucking, what, 30 years of training at this point, or 25, 26. And like they even if it hadn't been filmed,
Mm,
right? It was to discipline everybody else that saw it because they knew there were other people there. It wasn't like they were doing this in a hidden alley that nobody could see it. And I think the same way too about like the publicizing of all the images of Venezuela, right? Like it's like, hey, look at what we can do. Look at the might, look at the way that we can come in and slaughter people and kidnap someone. Um, but there's an interesting thing, and I plan to talk about this with Lara Shihai next week. I'm going to go on the Psychic Militancy podcast. We'll talk about it a little bit. But that disciplining can kind of go both ways, right? Like it can lead people to be like, oh, well, I don't want to do that because I
mm.
could end up like her, or I could end up like Nicolás Maduro if we don't change our policies and our approach. But it can also work the other way where it leads to these mass protests, civil unrest, whatever we want to call that, rioting, so on and so forth. um and I mean, not that the state doesn't have the capacity to manage that as well, because it does. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where you wanted to go with Renee, but that's one of the things that's on my mind in terms of the connection of the two.
I've it's become a joke now, with the people in my chat, is that I've been working on this Grand Platinum video, and I have not been able to get it out, um, mainly because it was a developing thing, but also because of just a lot of
This is gonna
my life.
it's gonna be your magnum opus. It's either gonna be like you've built it up now to the point where like it's either going to be
Right.
like your Titanic, or it's just not like, it's
Yeah.
it's gonna be like, oh, well, that was nice. You spent 2 years building this Grand Platinum video, but
It's just so much, and, you can tell from the background, so much has changed that I just haven't had time to wrap it literally needs to wrap up. Um, I don't think it's anything outstanding, but I just think it expresses my frustration with the idea that I bring up in the video is how long before you hear the same voices advocating for Grand Platinum. Uh, exactly. Um, how long will it take for the same voices excusing Grand Platinum's war crimes and his time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I believe also like in the Horn of Africa, or in along Africa as well, before we hear them making excuses for ICE agents? How long before we hear them say, well, they just needed that Trump bonus because they needed to put food on the table, roof over their head? How long before they can say, they regret what they did, which I don't even think Graham Plattner has said. He's made himself the victim by saying that he was misled. So, how long before an ICE agent can claim that he was misled before these liberals start excusing and advocating and shaming us for not supporting? So the Vanguard just had Crystal Ball from Breaking Points on their show to talk about Venezuela, and they were talking about, oh, we were so optimistic at the end of last year, at the start of this year, because Mamdani won this and that. Not bringing up the fact that he was, promoting um, the ousting of Nicolás Maduro through the Miami baptism, but also like they mentioned Grand Platinum. And it's like, oh yeah, his they didn't allow a white supremacist tattoo to stop them from supporting him. In fact, that made them ride or die. And these are all white individuals. And but even if he didn't have that tattoo, the war record should have been enough. This individual kept going as a machine gunner, right? And so I say this all to say that the rehabilitation of what we should be considered war criminals has already happened for those that went abroad. The rehabilitation of those within is going to occur by liberals as well. It's just a matter of time before they start excusing all these ICE agents. It's a matter of time with enough reforms and enough training that liberals will say, oh, well, ICE agents are finally doing their job right. Now they're doing it correctly. It's going to happen. It's unavoidable. They have to normalize the status quo. That is their job. That is their objective. That is their purpose of existing, within the structures that we have, to create and uphold the illusion of democracy, of the idea that this can be saved and reformed, that somehow they can be course corrected. It can't. It just simply can't. It's a settler colonial project. Imagine saying the same thing about the Zionist entity. You wouldn't say the same thing about the Zionist entity. It's no different here. So I know that's a long way to say that. The fact that, yeah, that he was an Iraq war veteran just makes perfect sense and aligns with everything, but it does burst the bubble of the liberal talking point. Oh, they're untrained. Who gives a fuck how long they were trained for? The end result is the same. Their job is to oppress and subjugate us and to execute us if they deem it necessary. It's as simple as that. No matter what training, no matter what cameras they have on them, whether they have a mask or no mask, that is the objective, whether there's a crowd around them recording them or not. That is their objective. And to downplay and to pretend that it isn't, it's contributing to the illusion and putting us at risk. And that's why we have to view these figures as our political opponents. And that's why I call them, they're counterinsurgent propagandists, because they're here to, and Kwame Ture talked about it, the liberal, at the end of the day, we know where they stand, who they align with. And so all these talking points, you don't hear them talking about abolish ICE anymore. Even the commentators don't talk about that anymore, because they've accepted and normalized that ICE is going to exist, because they're political figures, they're political heroes. The people that they're investing in have already given up on that and normalized that as well. And God forbid if they push back on them. God forbid that they demand more from them, because then they might sound like us, and they can't be on their high horse pretending that they're practical, that they're rational, unlike us, unlike the leftists, the tankies, the communists, all these accelerationists, all this shit that they label on us. In order for what? To maintain the status fucking quo, to normalize the new state oppression, the new dogs of the state, ICE. I can admit that I fell for AOC, crying at these ICE concentration camps. I fell I was like, a brown woman.
It's okay. I've fallen for stupider shit than that, so it's okay, Carlos. But I was I was hip to it by that point.
Yeah, I was just hopeful that, okay, my whole thing was like, if she pulls the same stunt during a Biden administration, maybe he'll be embarrassed. Maybe she has enough support from the youth that it will cause some type of positive change, because this is affecting people in my family. And what did she do? She dropped all that shit as soon as Biden was elected. She dropped all that shit. And now you have her once again finger wagging. Once again, I think I'll shoot you a video that we could watch of the Majority Report, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, shoot it to me. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add as you're pulling that up is just I actually was a little bit surprised, and I had to think about why I was surprised and what was wrong with me being surprised. But for a minute, I was surprised when I saw like the way Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis were talking, and I was like, well, wait a minute, like they're not anti-ICE. Like, what the fuck are they, doing or talking about? And also, their fucking cops kill people. Like, what, like, what are we talking about? Like, George Floyd was here, right? These people were fucking, but then I was like, oh, like, of course, like, this is, we got midterms coming up, we got, a presidential election coming up in not that long. And I mean, again, the part of the two-faced, I did actually change the thumbnail to do two-faced on ICE and Venezuela. Because Yeah, I mean, they are totally two-faced on ICE. There were a faction. It was a small group, but there were a few politicians, you know, AOC, maybe a couple others, right, that had the kind of like abolish ICE rhetoric, and then when they would get interviewed on it, they would be like, "Well, abolish really means reimagine," and you know, but but they but they never were serious, right? And it was a campaign, thing. It was a propagandistic thing that we've seen to help them get elected and get the support of different groups, bring in different constituencies, folks to their left, and so on. And also understanding that it was a pretty popular demand, right? It's not even just it's not even just the far left that can be convinced that actually this force that was started 20 years ago, that everybody pretty much doesn't like what they do, that we actually don't need this thing. Like, we haven't had it. It's not it's not the same thing. I mean, I agree with what you're saying in terms of, yeah, they're just cops, but you can make this kind of reformist proceduralist argument that actually we don't need this thing, just like fucking Donald Trump says we don't need the Department of Justice, or we don't need, the Department of the EPA or whatever else, um
Education.
yeah. Right. No, yeah, that's right. He wouldn't say the justice. I meant the Department of Education. Yeah. The Department of Justice he would just like to call the Department of Internal War or something like that. But domestic warfare. Uh but anyway, like, you can have that. And they have to account. There's no who's pushing these people to account for, like, why wasn't there any effort under the Biden administration for you all to reform this if that was your plan? Like, if you were just about reimagining, why didn't you reimagine and scale back and, like, limit give more training? Where was the training for ICE under Biden? Um, like, and that's the so we're gonna get this. We're gonna get, like, this discussion. We've been through the charade around accountability, around, well, it is true that ICE very rarely gets prosecuted for the people that it murders, and maybe every once in a while, one of these bad apples needs to be thrown out so the rest of them, don't continue to kill people without consequences, and that's the thing too. Like, if it hadn't been Renee Good, right? And that was just some undocumented, say an undocumented man, right? In Who was driving away. I don't think you would have I don't think you would have the state response that you have, right? And I don't think we have to think about this that deeply. I mean, I don't know videos that are circulating necessarily about that, but people are being killed by ICE all the time. Like, there were 2 people shot in Portland by ICE yesterday, and what is the media doing? They're engaged in a taking the state at its word to demonize those individuals and say they're what? Venezuelan gang members. That's what they're saying, right? And so, like, yeah. Anyway, I'll pull up the clip. You can respond if you want to. You have it? Did you send it to me? Or you texted it to me? Uh, okay. You're
Yeah,
muted, by
on
the way.
the WhatsApp. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So this whole thing of Tim Walz, it's hilarious because I remember when he was announced as the VP, everyone was like so happy because the Zionist foo from Pennsylvania, shoot, what was his name? The
Oh,
Zionist
fucking
from
Josh Shapiro, who's running for
Josh Shapiro.
reelection. Yeah,
Yeah,
his fucking
like
fake. He's the governor of the state I live in. His fake
right.
fucking affected Obama impersonation that he does. That has to be like. I mean, that's got to be one of the most insulting things that I've ever watched somebody do, and he just did it again to talk about his reelection bid. So yeah. Anyway, fuck Josh Shapiro.
It also reminds me, and it's a very problematic show, but Dee and Always Sunny in Philadelphia when she does her impression of Obama, which is just straight like minstrel character fucking racist shit. That's what like Shapiro reminds me of when he does it. It's just like the liberal version of it being okay. Um, but everyone was celebrating Tim Walz. Oh, Harris picked him, this and that. And it's like, well, yeah, because Shapiro's cutthroat. Shapiro would have found a way to like, get her out of being mentally incompetent for the position or whatnot. Like he is a true like politician through and through. Tim Walz, he plays the game, but he understands there's a cap for him, and he lacks that killer instinct. However, during BLM, he did not hesitate to deploy the National Guard to the point that Donald Trump was praising him personally. And that was swept under the rug. Oh no, this and that. Everybody was glorifying him because he looked like the bigger, jollier version of Bernie Sanders. And so, oh, he's like a little league coach, all this shit that they're pushing. He could speak to the everyman. He's calling them weirdos. Oh my gosh, this is a guy. Until this day, you hear liberals upset that the Harris campaign kind of pulled the leash on him a little bit. My opinion is that he was just being too charismatic. People were liking him over Harris, and they couldn't have that. They didn't choose him for that, right? So with him, we were watching his press conference speech, and he was legit, and it was honestly a little terrifying because liberals are so good at that. He was bragging about, the National Guard here. These are your neighbors. These are your friends. These are people from Minneapolis. These are coaches. These are construction workers. These are nurses that are stepping up to secure, the safety of the city, of the state. These aren't federal agents coming here that you don't know. And I'm like listening to that. I'm like, oh, this was bragging that when it comes to putting a boot on your neck, when it comes to smashing skulls, when it comes to using chemical weapons against you, for you daring to contest the state, that it will be your neighbors, it will be people in your own fucking community that are going to use force against you. That's what he's saying. That's what he's announcing. And that's what we're supposed to be praising. That's what we're supposed to be glorifying. That's what we should be advocating and supporting for and investing our political energy into. And that is terrifying. And for whatever reason, these people, because Hassan Piker was somebody that was like, oh, my Tim Walz, he's my go, he's this and that. Same thing with Rand Plattner. It's like, do you not understand what the project is, or are you complicit in it? I think the latter. But that that press conference was chilling, man. And not only him, but I forget who else in his administration was talking about, you can protest, you can use the First Amendment right, but do it peacefully. I said, take a shot every time they say peacefully or peaceful, because you're gonna be gone by the end of that press conference. But also, they kept talking about do it legally and stay off the roadways. And they kept repeating this line. And I'm like, oh shit, it's a dog whistle to let us know that they hold Renee Good accountable for her death, for her murder. Otherwise, why would they continue to be like, stay off the roadways or something might happen to you? Again, it's an example that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are using to be like, hey, stay in line. But yeah, I don't know if you want to put up that video or if you want to add to that.
No, I was just looking. I'll pull up the video. I was just looking to see if they've passed one of those laws to make it illegal to protests on like highways and stuff like that. But it does. It looks like they don't. But you can't be. It does say you can't block cars, pedestrians, or public transit without a permit. But whatever. But yeah, so like but I hear you. So on that clip, what part do you just start from the beginning?
Just start from the beginning, and it'll just mainly be what Emma Vigeland has to say. The rest doesn't really matter.
As of like the beginning of the year, I sent in 2,000 thugs. Bovino, my understanding was either was slated to come there today or sometime this week. I mean, just
sorry, Jared, I sent you the wrong clip.
How big of a presence that is.
I sent the wrong clip, brother. I'm so sorry. It's right here. It was talking about AOC and the leadership.
All right,
there we go. I just sent it to you. My apologies.
No, it's all good. You just gotta say a few more things while I pull it up.
Yeah, no. So what I did want to say is also the mayor, right? That was over here saying, "Get the fuck out," trying to like really demonstrate that the reason I do this is because it's all like performative aesthetics of like chest beating to demonstrate your manliness and your anger, and it's just aesthetics. When again, he was there during the BLM uprisings and was refusing to say that he was going to, hold the police accountable in any significant way, but he would show up to try and save face. It's all performative.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like they can say that now because it's not their police force, right? Like they don't have to deal, we're talking about federal agents, right? Like yes, they do have to deal with the US government, but they already have very strained relationships with the Trump administration anyways, right? And if he comes down harder on them, they'll just use that as their own, political capital as well as like, look, he's trying to, attack, democratic cities and states. But like, if it was a Minneapolis police officer who had done that, the tone would be totally different. It would be, let our institutions, investigate and do their process and, the whatever, like the officer was in fear for his life, like they would do all of that shit. So yeah, it's totally because it's on a different agency. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure if this has been verified, but I've seen that Jonathan Ross, who was the shooter, the murderer of Renee Good, I've seen that he is from Minneapolis. And so
right, but I'm saying
go
ahead.
No, I'm saying if that's the case, their whole line about we don't need these federal agents coming into our towns or cities or state, we could police ourselves, is like, well, this is a homegrown terrorist. Essentially, this is a homegrown issue that you have here, and it makes perfect sense that, again, Iraq war veteran, ICE agent now, and he's a local. The same way that you're advertising that your that your National Guard aren't federal agents, but your neighbors. Well, look at what your neighbor does when he's an ICE agent.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, let me start this.
We've talked a lot about how the Democratic Party's leadership has been fascist, enabling collaborationists, not meeting the moment in many ways. But we have a insurgent kind of progressive candidate crop, politician crop that is messaging on this the right way. And they are actually, I do think, pushing some of the other more centrist or like center of the party, I should say, more Democrats to speak in ways like saying this Venezuela invasion is about the oil. You have Bill Kristol, who used to be a Republican, talking about how we should abolish ICE. And I know he's not a lawmaker, but
should be in jail.
The conversation is changing a bit. AOC is obviously the besides Bernie Sanders and Zoran Mamdani right now, like they're the three most important kind of or visible left-wing leaders right now in terms of who are elected to higher office at the moment. And this was her statement on the killing of the murder of Renee Good by an ICE agent in Minneapolis yesterday.
All the asterisks.
What happens if the mayor wants ICE out, so does the governor, the senators? What if ICE doesn't leave Minneapolis? What are the implications of that?
Well, first of all, what happened and what we saw today was a horrific act of violence. And my heart goes out to the victim's family of this. I think what we have now seen, what we are seeing is that ICE is not just becoming an anti-immigrant force in this country, it is becoming an anti-civilian paramilitary organization. People are getting taken off of the streets for exercising their free speech rights. The president himself has asserted that, in fact, one of the reasons that this murder may have been, quote unquote, justified is on free speech grounds. So this is now turned into what our greatest fear is and has been for a long time around ICE, that this will be used as an anti-civilian force, that it has no accountability. At the end of the day, what we saw today is a murder. and murders in cold blood need to be prosecuted. And we've seen what happened to this woman I believe it was just a few blocks away from where George Floyd was murdered. And what we need to see is this incident prosecuted. What we saw today was a criminal murder a woman and shoot her in the head while she was trying to escape and flee.
Yep. The anti-civilian force part, I think, is key here, and referring to them as a paramilitary organization is absolutely accurate. Graham Plattner, this morning, or is this the social media video? Okay, this is a different one. This is him. He went on MS Now.
Just to highlight something, like Jared, that's your first time watching that?
Oh
AOC's
yeah. Listen, the only times I've ever watched the Majority Report is when I'm talking to you.
No.
So like,
I torture you with this. No. The AOC AOC commentating on that. Was that your first time watching her?
Yeah, I hadn't seen it.
Yeah. What did she say of significance?
It's the first time. I'm just hearing this. This is the first time that. Yeah.
But what did she say? Like what was said of significance? Like what actions is she going to take? What is the Democratic Party going to do? I didn't hear anything of substance.
Sum it up with the comments from the chat. Oh, brother, this politician stinks. And wait, are immigrants not civilians? Question. Yeah, I mean, like, nothing really. You know, I mean, she did use some, you know, equating them to a paramilitary organization, which is not true. Actually, I mean, they are a law enforcement entity, right? Federal law enforcement, like, you know, I mean, they are militarized in the same way that every fucking police force in this country, down to your like local county sheriff's office, has fucking tanks and like, you know, bazookas probably and helicopters, right? So yeah, they are militarized, but she's sort of equating them with like militias in a certain way. You know, which again, like the idea behind that also maybe is somewhat important, right? Because even like the Second Amendment says that you have a right to a militia, but it has to be well regulated. And so she'd just be like, oh, well, we just need some more regulation here. I mean, it's not very, yeah, I mean, nothing that she said really meant much of anything other than just trying to sound rhetorically against it, which is also, I'd say, would connect even to people who are, you know, to the right of her on the Democratic Party, is a similar kind of line right now.
Yeah, and that's my frustration is again, when they had political power, no talk about abolishing ICE, no talk about reforming ICE. In fact, again, Joe Biden's bill, and it always makes me laugh that Joe Biden didn't even bother to have the Latino caucus or whatever the fuck they call themselves, those vendidos, to have any input on that border bill. So it's like, you know, you sell out and you still have no say. Harris had a campaign ad glorifying ICE and Border Patrol, talking about she's actually going to be tough on the border, unlike Trump. And she was out there campaigning for her. She was alongside Bernie Sanders, one of the last individuals to stop supporting Biden when his brain was oozing out of his head. But excuse me, Theo Bernie was out here with Tim Dillon talking about, oh, Trump is doing great with ICE. I don't know if you saw that as well, but it's like, it's ridiculous where it's like,
yeah, I did see that.
These people are upset of how they're approaching it, how they're going about it. They're not upset at the fact that it's happening. If they did, they would have been, when they had political power, advocating for ICE. Again, like you said, if we want to play that fucking game that they're playing, okay, why didn't you reform ICE then? Why didn't you make sure that there was, you know, some type of parameters, even the illusion of them, that were going to restrain Trump from using the way that he's using them now? Of course, they're not going to do that. And they praise fucking Graham Plattner.
Yeah, just throw him in there.
Yeah. They can't help themselves, man.
Was it? So is there more to the clip, or we keep going?
Yeah, it's a little bit more. It's just on Grand Platinum. It's
right.
fucking hilarious.
All right, hang on.
Morning Joe, and said some very similar things.
Let's just remember that this inevitability was the point. When you develop a law enforcement or a security organization, like we have done with ICE, certainly over the past year, where we have expanded numbers, we have brought in people who, quite frankly, are unqualified, given them short and in many ways clearly very poor training and an inability to handle stressful situations. This is not surprising. And the people that built this apparatus, they knew that this was coming, because the point of this, the point of ICE's operations over the past half year, really, it has nothing to do with creating safety in American communities. It has everything to do with terrorizing communities and using this kind of, frankly, state violence as a mechanism of cowing political opponents. That was the point. That's why we did that. I mean, this is not, I don't mean to be flippant here, but it does not take a rocket scientist to see where this was going.
It's helpful to have him, speak in those terms. Like we've said that the left needs to become a little bit more conspiratorial, or maybe I've said that and it's not the best way to phrase it. It's more just like genuinely critical of the state. Like for too long, leadership has been, because they're more there as like stewards and Sam would use the term concierge for Schumer, but they're maintenance people for a system that is not working anymore, that's their role. They are not speaking about state power in those terms and how it actually impacts people, and it's impactful because it means that you're positioning yourself as a critic of a government that is completely dysfunctional at this point.
Everyone's familiar with the chart of the GDP growth and
right. Matt Leck starts yapping over there. Man, it's funny because they can't help themselves. They truly can't. They're still propping up AOC, who turned her back after that theatric display at the border. Stop talking about abolish ICE. Graham Plattner, who, look, I'm not trying to weigh Renee Good's life to anyone's, but objectively speaking, Graham Plattner has done worse than Jonathan Ross. He has more blood on his hands. I mean, you know what? You're right.
The same fucking unit, as far as we know. Like,
exactly. You're right. Yeah. I forgot about the Iraq thing. Well, he did more tours, I think, as a machine gunner by choice. So Graham Plattner probably has more blood on his hands.
Well, and that's the rationale he gives for his tattoo too, right? Is that it wasn't that, like, I didn't know about the Nazi thing, but that's what machine gunners get. So we got that, so it was
we bring death and destruction, and he's proud of that shit. And so with that in mind, look at what Graham Plattner said now. Immediately, they're untrained. Immediately. And that's some reformist bullshit. We just need to train them better. We need to train the oppressing fucking attack dogs better. And that's all liberals and then the Democratic Party can offer. Well-behaved attack dogs. They'll only attack when we tell them to, and only to the level of aggression that we approve. If they go too far, we might hold them accountable. Whereas the Trump administration is at least saying, nope, we're here to crush skulls, and they have immunity, we'll protect them no matter what. It's just an aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I mean, one, so just working first from the Plattner point, your argument is that there are unqualified people who are not properly trained, and this guy served in the same military, in the same wars that you did, that just did the thing, right? So it's like, I mean, if I signed up for ICE tomorrow and got to get my whatever, I don't know what it is, 80,000 whatever a year, and write off my student debt or whatever the fuck, like, I would genuinely not know what the fuck I was doing. That's true, right? You know, obviously they would train me to kill people and to kidnap people because that's what they train you to do. Um, because also, I mean, it's separating the function of these things too, right? From like what do we think ICE is for? Like to make people like to, ICE is not, there's a reason that we don't in kindergarten teach ICE among the community helpers alongside policemen and firemen, right? Because like literally their job is to kidnap people and, put them in cages straight. Like they don't have any other function. They're not there to show you, which way do you go to get to the local Taco Bell or like, it's just not,
Wait, why'd you say Taco Bell?
They're not sitting at, I'm sorry, I couldn't think of anything better.
I bet, bro.
They're not sitting at the school crosswalk, right? To guide your kid into, the recess area or whatever. Like, and I'm not, just to be clear, I'm being glib. I'm not saying that to say that police actually are community helpers at all. But I'm just saying like they have a very limited purview of what they are supposed to do, right? Which is to track, kidnap, cage, and if necessary, kill people, right? Like that's it. They're not even within a law enforcement function, it's a very limited one. And to suggest that somebody who's been in the US military hasn't learned to do those same things is like just intellectually dishonest. We can come back to that as long with my stupid reference to Taco Bell. Apologies.
Don't apologize.
It was, yeah.
I'm not coming on again, huh?
Oh man. But the other side of it is like you referenced the bringing up Plattner, bringing up AOC. Like this is, and it connects to what you said earlier about the DSA, right? And I guess more broadly even than the DSA within like this, when we started talking about these individuals, I was like, oh yeah, the Bernie media sphere. Like this is what I think about these people, right? Because their followings and their audience is large part. I'm not saying I know people who watch this show, watch those shows, etc. Like I'm not saying that like there isn't some overlap or that people don't, look at these different things, because I recognize that they do critique certain things. They did throw shots at Schumer. Like, people go and I'm sure they get news from these places, etc. Right. But their job is ultimately to point people towards the AOCs and the Bernies and the Graham Plattners, like whoever the candidates are that they're like, okay, this is one of our folks. Like their job is to continually cycle people back to those folks, as she was saying, as like the leadership of the left. Right. And that serves them monetarily. It serves them in terms of audience. It gives them a veneer of legitimacy to people, right? Because they're connected to these, powerful or popular figures, Mamdani, right? But and it retains validity for their platforms too, because they're always nice to these folks. It also means that it also means that those people will come on, right? That they'll bring big numbers when they do, that they could, that. So it's like, and that's, I mean, I once heard a DSA member in a meeting. I'm not a member, but I have attended some meetings before. And I once heard one who there was a local guy who was running for a like a city council role, basically in a small city in our township, right? Not Philly. And he came through. He was going to fight the privatization of the sewage system, which it's like, yeah, sure, like that's fine. It's, but that was his whole platform, right? Like that was it. Like he was like, this is my issue. I'm focusing on that. He did say, I'll also listen to you all on other issues that you have, right? DSA then you get the fors and againsts, the people who discuss it, right? Everybody was for, but one person in particular came up and said, I believe anytime anyone comes in and asks us for our endorsement, we should say yes, because that builds legitimacy for our organization. Right. And I just thought like, that is, I'm not saying that everybody in DSA thinks like that. I know that they don't. And I know that there are people who also do think they should abandon the Democratic Party thing and all of that, and do want to turn it into a communist organization. Like, I know that there's a variety. But I was like, that is a representative of a certain idea that exists within these progressive spaces that I think comes through in those kind of majority report thing. Like, they have a similar approach to their media work of, these people are going to be our folks and we're going to rally behind them regardless of the contradictions. And that's why with Graham Plattner in particular, he reveals this, right? Because if it was somebody who didn't have your brand attached to them in a certain way, you'd be like, oh, he has a Nazi tattoo? Maybe I was wrong about this guy. Oh, he served in, the Iraq War. Oh, there's a lot of things here that are starting to raise questions. And I say this too, I don't know if I said this to you last time we were on, but in PA, we had Fetterman, right? And Fetterman had a good reputation as lieutenant governor. Folks locally here that were in organizations will tell you, he was a part of the parole review board, and he helped get a number of folks who had juvenile life without parole sentences out of prison. He was a part of those efforts and working, not saying hand in glove, but the activists knew okay, we're going to take these cases, the activist lawyers, and he would approve most of them. It was one of the things that Dr. Oz, who ran against him, used in the election against him, was to say, oh, this guy just wants to let murderers run the streets. This was one of the attacks on him. But look at him now. He is the most fascist, Zionist, disgusting, individual, right? And I don't know, we'd have to go back. It'd be very interesting to see, and maybe this is to add to your plate of things to do, what was, Majority Report, Breaking Points, these different platforms, what was their coverage of John Fetterman during that campaign? It'd be very interesting to see, right? Because I think Plattner could very easily be another Fetterman.
So it's funny because it was kind of mixed. It was a little bit more critical for sure. But whenever you bring up the fact that, hey, this might be another Fetterman, they immediately mock you. That is their approach. Oh, you only bring up Fetterman because you're there's another war veteran on the Majority Report, a new producer. I forget their name, but he is a man child. And he's like, oh, if you bring up Fetterman, it goes to show that you are a child in politics. You lack any understanding of broader politics. And it's no, it's just the easiest example to bring up, in the moment. But at the end of the day, it's, hey, we've fallen for this facade, this image, the aesthetic of a blue collar, white male, macho, that image that they're trying to sell us with Graham Plattner was already used recently, to the point that even Graham Plattner is kind of poking fun at it with Fetterman, because he showed up to some event in a suit and he goes, oh, I promise I'll never show up in basketball shorts to a political event or whatever. And it's you're calling us childish, and yet as he could only go as deep as saying, hey, my clothing is going to be different, literally letting us know that it's all aesthetic. It's an aesthetic difference. Now, do I think that Graham Plattner is going to turn around and support the Zionist entity to the same degree that Fetterman has been? No, I don't think so. But I read his campaign platform, and it says that he's going to, fill the gap between China and the U.S. in terms of shipping, that he's going to address the recruitment crisis that the U.S. military has, that he's going to make sure that servicemen and women make enough financially, so he's going to increase their pay, which does what? Entice individuals to join the military even more. So if you look at Graham Plattner's platform, he's already letting us know that all this anti-war bullshit is just that. It's bullshit. He is going to be pro-war. There's no reason to increase, your military. The U.S. needs to increase their military capacity in what fucking world and what degree, right? Because you're already fear-mongering over China. Why would you need more people in the military if you're anti-war? You get what I'm saying? Like, why are you concerned about the recruitment crisis? Why are you trying to entice people to join the military when we're going through this economic fucking downfall, when people are desperate to join? I mean, that's what Trump was doing to get people to join ICE, that bonus. And that's what Graham Plattner is saying he's going to do for the U.S. military. So it's funny how they'll laugh you off if you bring up Fetterman. And some of them, I would have to go back to determine which ones were writing for Fetterman. But regardless, the fact that they all came in full support of him after his stroke, because they all did the lesser two evils, that Oz was going to be so much worse. And look what happened. They ended up with the same bullshit anyways, because the Democratic Party is never going to provide an appropriate, answer, solution to this. They're always going to, I've been saying this a lot, like, compromise is a sacrifice of the marginalized. And that's all liberals can do, is determine who is the most marginalized people that they can sacrifice in order to maintain the status quo, in order to maintain the illusion of progress, and that somehow reform can save this fucking settler colonial empire. It can't. And so they're reforming, they're salvaging the image of an Iraq and Afghanistan mercenary. And again, it's just a matter of time before they do the same thing for the ICE agents that are kidnapping people and murdering people off the streets. Because like I said, I'm pretty fucking sure that Graham Plattner has more blood in his hands than Jonathan Ross, who just murdered Renee Good. They'll reform him too. Yeah.
So this would be interesting to dig back into, but Majority Report decided that the incident Fetterman had of pulling a gun on a black man because he heard fireworks was not a big deal. Got to vote progressive. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to dig in. I bet they did support in a lot of different ways. And yeah, that was one of the things that I actually didn't hear that story until after, after he was elected. But yeah. In the UK, you should have seen the way the British left backed Keir Starmer for Labour leader when Corbyn stepped down. I do still have to say, if people missed that episode I did with Benji from Resistance is Fertile, where he talked about being in, a Maoist sect with Keir Starmer at Oxford, like it's one of the wildest stories that I have ever heard on our platform, and it's worth listening to. He believed that Keir was the cop in the group, most likely.
They need cops for Maoist groups? Not respectfully.
Actually, so this particular one was according to the story, was building a weapons factory in Algeria for was it for the Libyan? I can't remember but yeah. Anyways, it's worth listening to the story. It's a wild story. Okay. And the belief was that it was funded by Gaddafi. Was part of the interesting stuff around it. Anyway, yeah, I'm getting roasted in the chat today, rightfully so. That Jay attended some DSA meetings, writing this down. I will get a text from you later, Brooke, I'm sure. It's okay. I will only judge you in silence. Thank you. Rouse pasta sauce. Foot in mouth. Yeah. Not to be confused with LA. Not to be confused with LA Taco.
Shout out to them. Yeah, great work.
Taco Bell is a Demolition Man reference. Very apropos. Yeah. That once we get to Imperial 90s, then that will be great. Makes sense. But. All right. Was there more? What else? What else we have?
So no, I mean, I think that was mainly it. It's just look, it doesn't like people brag about their political predictions and all that shit, which is like, I don't know why you need an ego boost and something that is so um that is real, that affects people's lives. Like, go predict your fucking fantasy football league if you want. Like, go do that. But the way that they brag about the political predictions is just, it grosses me out, because a lot of people were like trying to predict when or if Trump was going to invade Venezuela, as if that's not, as if you're not like talking about people's livelihood and their lives and their well-being, and like you mentioned, the trauma of knowing that the US can invade whenever the fuck they want. And we're doing nothing about it. We're just not doing anything about it. So like, I'm not trying to do that, but what I am trying to get across is that, liberals follow the same fucking methods every time. And like I mentioned, Kwame Ture, like the pitfalls of liberalism, like he lays it all out. Like, there really is no wiggle room. Like, he lays it all out in detail, what they do. And it's funny how, when I'm telling you that they're going to reform, they're going to glorify, they're going to forgive, they're going to, help save the image of an ICE agent at some point or another, that's going to happen sooner rather than later, right? We're going to be alive to see that shit happen. ICE is not going anywhere. They're going to be around. They made sure to clamp down on the abolish movement. They were weaponizing it. They were co-opting it. They're going to do this. It's probably going to be an ICE agent of color. There's plenty of fucking vendidos, Latinos that are fucking border patrol and ICE. So they're going to use that angle. It might be a woman, something like that. It might be somebody that is currently in ICE that is voicing, privately or on their own, personal social media page, oh, this wasn't right, this was wrong. So they could turn back and point at that and be like, oh, see, they were against the unlawful shooting, the murder of Renee Good. And they're going to weaponize Renee Good's image as well. These are shameless fucking, I used to call them like leeches and roaches, but then people told me let's not use that type of language, but just shameless opportunists that will distort reality and weaponize the loss of life, the taking of life, in order to maintain the status quo and to be in the good graces of the Democratic Party. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. So it's just a matter of time.
Appreciated. There's some, let me go through some chat stuff here. Thank you also, man, for all of this. This is a great conversation again, and really appreciate it. And we didn't get to the YouTube comment from last time. Maybe we'll save that for part 3.
The Mandela, Mandela or the other
no,
one?
the other one. Because we'll get more after this, and then we can do like a, we can bring them in. We already got a couple in the comments here, and I'll raise them up. But so this was a good comment up front. Since last September, ICE have unalived 9 people by shooting in the street and 2 wounded yesterday, sexually abused children in detention, kidnapped 60 to 70,000 people, and around 100 deaths in detention. Good figures. Appreciate it.
Well, not good figures, Jared. But
well, no. I mean, good. Yeah. Well, bad correct information. That's bad. Good, yeah, exactly. So this comment, they're different than a normal police force though, because they're completely unaccountable. These shootings haven't even been investigated. Part of what I would say, I mean, that's like a whole episode that we could go into, but police are largely unaccountable, right? And there is some accountability theater around it. And, it's true that through tons and tons of protests and organizing and so on, that a few police officers have been convicted to very short sentences for killing people. And that it's true that there basically isn't any veneer of that accountability within ICE. The problem more than anything I have with that comment is that it sort of suggests that what we need is a little bit of accountability theater around ICE. And I think that's exactly what the Democrats will be fighting for, is a little bit of accountability theater around ICE. And then they'll continue to do what they do anyway. And I think that plus some training, which will probably be a way to figure out to send some more money to Israel, to train them to be better ICE agents, because who knows better than Israel? You know, so yeah, anyway, I don't think that's I don't look, people have to figure out in organizations and communities what demands make sense for them for their struggles. So I'm not here to tell you, you know, that's a process you should engage in, but that's not a demand that I would spend a lot of time trying to focus around, because the accountability is also going to be at the federal level anyway. It's going to be the DOJ or the FBI, which is what they're already saying. The FBI is the one that will investigate it, you know. Anyway. Other questions? I don't know if this is true or not, but I found it funny. Fun fact, Fetterman is short for, my German is not good. Man ist das ein fetter racist? Look at that massive racist. Maybe that is actually German. You can confirm for me in the chat, Alex, whether that's a joke or not, but that's hilarious either way.
It's a long way for a joke, but I've never been good with puns, especially not in different languages.
The stream is a battle between two marathoners. Yeah, we could go all day if it wasn't, you know, for family constraints and everything else. But yeah.
Did you catch me last time when I'm like, Jared has to be a good father? It's like, oh, he has to be a good family man over here.
So this appreciate this. If it's a criticism, you know, to be honest, I agree with some criticisms of Western Marxists, but then you guys get really harsh. I mean, some of what we're saying is hopefully partially in jest, like in terms of like, I don't know. I'm never trying to go too harsh. I appreciate the comment though. I do think we should be really harsh with Western Marxism. I actually think that it is I wish I had an exact quote to pull from Ali Qadri, because he has some great ones about it. But it's a left sounding theoretical defense of imperialism or of empire at the end of the day. And so I think we should be ruthless with our critique, and probably as far as myself, I don't think I've done that enough. But on the flip side of that, you know, the humility needs to come in terms of what do we have to offer people as an alternative to it. And frankly, we don't have a whole lot to offer people as an alternative to it right now. And so part of where I come on it, and it's something I think Carlos and I may engage in another discussion too, in terms of like, how do you relate with these different forces and stuff like that, from organization, from a media criticism perspective and all of that, is that, yeah, I mean, ultimately, Chris Gilbert said to me in one of our conversations about Venezuela that like the real critique comes when the masses move, right? And so like us saying what we say, like we are at the end of the day a couple of guys who are talking shit, and without something that we're like, hey, like join this organization where we're doing X, Y, and Z in our like. And so, you know, also Brooke, who made that joke about me attending DSA meetings before, also, you know, has said, you know, asking people to join like our variant of politics in some ways is like asking folks to jump into an abyss to a certain degree, right? It's like you're asking people to unravel all of this ideology and all of these belief systems, but what do you have to like catch them as they unravel? So it's really actually it can be a very violent and scary process, right? But I think it's necessary. And it's why I appreciate the work that you do and others, you know, Jared Ball, many people out there. Like, it's necessary to have a critique of these things, even if it's because you're going to be organizing with people who hold the same viewpoints. It's important to be able to think through, you know, these arguments that people are making and these demands that people are putting forward and these politicians that they're saying you should support, to be like, well, why should we do that? Like, what are we going to get? What is that? Why does that make sense? Right. And so anyway, it's our perspective. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one, Carlos.
Yeah, look, the reason why I hesitated so long to start streaming is because I lack a lot of the knowledge and education and the organizing history that a lot of your great fucking amazing guests have. But the reason why I said, all right, enough is enough is because a lot of the people that I was watching that were not far left or whatever, weren't calling themselves socialists, or maybe at some point a democratic socialist, whatnot, they were consistently misleading people. And I wasn't seeing them being criticized. So I'm like, well, they're to my right technically, and they can criticize the people to their right. Why can't I not criticize those individuals to my right that I feel are misleading people and maintaining the illusion that the Democratic Party and that the settler colonial empire can be reformed and saved? So let's talk about it. And this was ignited because of the normalization of liberal Zionism. And that's what got me going. This is prior to October 7th. So if it sounds like I'm just talking shit and I'm just hating, well, that's what got me to do this. That's what I do. I'm not here to enlighten people to, a political awakening. For honestly, I feel like most people, if you tune in to watch, my streams, it's because you're already on this shit. You already don't like those people, and you want to hear somebody that also dislikes them. I try my best to cover them. Quite often, most times I'm just reading articles, trying to read articles. Today I'm doing the book club after this of Open Veins in Latin America, because that's the type of shit that I like doing. But in terms of like, I don't know, being gentle to these people, being kind to them, nah, man. I always joke around the great white savior saint Michael Brooks about, being kind to people, being cruel to institutions or whatever. People make up institutions. People make up systems. Like, what are we doing? I'm going to be cruel to the people that are participating and enacting in this project. And that's why all respects and may she rest in peace, and may her family, find peace themselves someday, to Renee Good. But I've said this for years ago. The standard is, she's setting the current standard. John Brown set the epitome of the standard of what we expect from white allies, or what should be expected of them. So I'm not here to coddle anyone. I'm really not. And I don't expect to be coddled either. Yesterday I was getting fucking, taken a task by my chat about abolition. It's as simple as that. Like, I'm not here to, I don't know. I grew up learning. I'm stubborn. So I grew up learning through experience and figuring things out. And I'm very vocal about my shortcomings. I'm not here to provide any solutions for y'all. I'm here to shout about the despair and the misleadership figures that we have. But yeah.
Appreciated. Lots of folks defending Hassan in the chat. I'm not gonna. We don't need to.
You got those
engage
real?
in that. There are some. Not. I don't think they're regular watchers of our show.
Yeah.
But
just ask him why he went into business with the known Zionist Ethan Klein. Ask him why he was rocking IOF Fresh, Gila Klein, an IOF veterans clothing line. Ask him why he used homeless people to mock Teddy Fresh that he was rocking willingly. If you're anti-Zionist, why the fuck do you go into business with a Zionist family like the Kleins? It's that simple. That's just like one criticism, bro. But yeah, Hassan Piker's gonna make me cash my first case.
This is bad. Did I miss the Taco Bell tie-in joke about ICE agents directing people to the border? Oh, that's rough. I'm sorry, everybody.
Stop.
Cancel me.
There you go. Own it.
Imperialism is entertainment for the U.S. Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, I mean this. I do have to say something about this. I think I may have mentioned it on another stream, but I've really been bothered by it, and I need to talk about it with more people. But do you know who Wendell Pierce is?
Wendell Pierce, no, I don't.
Or maybe it's Wendell Pierce. So he's an actor. He played Bunk Moreland on The Wire, which was the show for my generation that I did love. Again, cancel me. There's plenty wrong with that shit. but he currently also just happened to see this yesterday. He's on another show on CBS where he plays a police chief or something like that. And look, like black actors, other people of color actors, they get really typecast and they get put into these, like, these are the roles that they can get, and like that part of it is not his fault. But he spoke out against the coup, or the coup attempt, the kidnapping of Maduro. And I thought, I mean, I'd have to go back to his whole timeline to review everything he said. There's probably some stuff in it I could critique if I wanted to. But like, for somebody in his position, I was like, yeah, good for him. Like, he's really, like, lighting into this.
Mm.
And then you go to his profile, and the first thing that you see is Jack Ryan, right? Because he plays CIA officer in Jack Ryan. And season 2, it was just said yesterday that the screenwriters of season 2 have come out and said, well, gosh, the CIA had this plan for a long time because they gave it to us for season 2 to write our script. They told us to put these things in that they did, right? And so you have to, like, I don't know. I mean, and maybe that's part of why he speaks out, right? Is because like his conscious of holding that, like, being a good person and trying to hold that contradiction, and he just can't, and so he's just like letting it out now. And maybe there'll be consequences for him negatively on that. I doubt it, because it's being done by a Republican president, and Hollywood is a fairly liberal place, and like, they'll find roles for him and all that. As long as he's still willing to play the CIA guy and the police chief or whatever, he'll probably continue to get it. But it's like, I don't know how I wouldn't be able to withhold that contradiction of, I'm literally going to play a CIA officer who's planning the overthrow of a country, and then see that shit play out in real time, and then talk a bunch of shit about it when I literally was a part of a TV show created to normalize for when this exact moment in history would happen. It's
literally
crazy.
He plays Perry White in the new Superman, so I think he'll be fine. I think James Gunn will take care of him. So.
R.I.P. Clay Davis. Shit. Yeah. All right. Carlos, have you ever seen Emma High on stream? If not, let me know if you want me to send you a clip.
I've seen it. I think she's a fucking joke. I think that the reason why Sam Seder chose her was because of her parents' connections to the DNC. Literally, I call her the most bland piece of bread in the Wonder Bread tube. Has no personality. She's more interested in sports than she is about politics. And I thought this before she accused me of being anti-Semitic. So yeah, I think she's somebody that is put there because milquetoast as can be.
My impersonations could use some work. Yeah, agreed. Problematic even attempting it. And that's why I love to uphold the Cooperation Jackson. They have theory and practice programs that people can grasp. Absolutely. Like, if you have an organization that one, join an organization if you can find one that you think is like, or start one. But also, if you have an organization that that does good work, like, uphold that and uplift it and support it. I am anything but anti-organization, like, can have critiques of certain things or whatever, but like, I believe people should be in organizations and either fighting for them to improve, or leaving and starting something new if they can't, or whatever. Like, join Black Alliance for Peace. Carlos, thank you for being you. You're an inspiration. We need more generational haters like yourself.
I'm in the school of Dr. Ball's pettiness.
So I don't remember. I don't know. Did this actually happen? Wendell Pierce punched a woman for supporting Bernie. And didn't know that. That's awful if that's true. Community Movement Builders, another organization. Yeah, actually, Carlos and I were talking about Community Movement Builders this week when we were talking about a question. I mean, like one of the question, and maybe we'll just put this out there somewhat and put a pin in it, right? Is the question of whether movements or organizations should engage these platforms that, like, Carlos is bringing forward these critiques on, and if so, how, right? And what does that look like? What are the pros and cons of that? And if we're saying no, does that also apply to worse platforms as well, right? Or how do we gauge what's better or worse in this kind of media sphere? Anyway, it's an interesting topic, and I think we might engage it. And one of the things that we were talking about when we were talking about it is it would be good to have various perspectives, so critical media perspectives as well as organizer perspectives, and people who have done communications work well in organizing spaces, and think and hear them also talk about like the contradictions versus like how they try to do it, and what are the pros and cons. Because part of my discussion about it is that if you're engaging with these platforms, sometimes there's a tendency, I think, that we can think of it as engaging with the hosts, right? Or engaging with, but you're also engaging the audiences, right? And so then that's a question of like, is that what does that look like? And how is there a principled way that one can do that, and anyway, so it's something that Carlos and I were kind of spitballing back and forth a little bit about this week anyway. But yeah. All right, man. Thank you. I agree with this too. Do your research before jumping into any organization, find out, argue, talk to other people who are a part of it, who maybe have left it, etc. Like that's all good. Do a little bit of internet research, although that's like fraught, right? Because it could be full of bullshit too.
I always end my
yeah.
streams quoting Glenn Ford, "Organize with eyes wide open." I just love that. Just DSA is all you got around you. I tell people join and get your hands, learn how to work with others, learn how to show up. That's honestly the hardest part of anything, is learning how to show up, making it part of your routine, and getting to it. Make your mistakes there so that when you join a leftist organization, you'll be better. Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm trying to see what this says. Is combating these radlib channels like calling from folk like y'all to kind of influence some of their community? I guess
like
this
kind
is
of, yeah.
So this is a good question. I mean, Carlos already said a little bit about it from his perspective of you feel like folks that are coming are already kind of looking for this critique or agree with this critique. I mean, I think I hear that from some people, of people saying, yeah, I watch it, right, because I'd rather get my news there than from CBS or Fox News or whatever else. But I do have these critiques, and I appreciate Deculturation for calling them out and doing it. So I've heard that from our viewers and listeners. There's also, I mean, my posture, I talked about this a little bit in the first conversation that we had, has historically been to ignore everything that's going on in this sphere. But there are real problems with that, because so many more people who agree with me on a lot of things, and may or may not agree with me on some others, or may not have received the perspectives that they get on this channel because they're you know, or others in our, you know, the folks that we collaborate with and go on and talk to and all that. Like they may not encounter that much. They may think it's fringe, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think everybody goes through a process of politicization, right? And some people reach a conclusion and an end of their journey and say, I'm a social democrat, right? Or they might call it a democratic socialist, right? But like where they're like, these are my politics. Like ultimately, I don't want to fundamentally, I'm not looking to overthrow capitalism or imperialism. Like I want healthcare and I want higher minimum wages and I want some popular demands. And you know, so I'm gonna go watch these channels and rock with them because that is like ultimately that's their political project. Like we could debate about whether that's even achievable in the United States at all, or whether that's even achievable by the candidates and the kind of political project that they're a part of, right? But that's it. Like that's what it is. And but people go through like different. I mean, look, I was a rad lib. I was a liberal. I was, you know, I've been through a lot of different phases in it. I've always had issues because solidarity to me was always an important thing. And I've always had issues with US imperialism. I've always had issues with racism in the United States as it exists, right? And has existed historically. You know, settler colonialism, right? So like there's just a number of issues that for me were always a stumbling block in terms of staying in that kind of social democratic camp because they don't have any answers for any of these issues, really, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, I don't do these streams to try to convince. It's these streams with Carlos are more, I think, because people like to hear these conversations, you know, more than anything else. It's not, but I do, as far as Western Marxism and social democratic politics, I think that they're very dangerous, right? And so part of our project on the whole has been to convince people that they need to be anti-imperialists. I don't believe that, you know, there is a real socialism without anti-imperialism. And I don't believe that there, you know, in the long run, there's not a functional anti-imperialism without socialism either. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately it's that I view those outlets or I view those politics as a kind of misdirection, and part of maintaining the system as a whole.
Yep. I mean, yeah, I mean, simply put, for me, it's just, I really do think these people should be viewed as our enemies. I mean, we have to start viewing liberals as our enemies. What more do they need to do to get us to view them as our enemies? I don't know. I really don't. So there's a lot of frustration there, but yeah, my hatred, I think, comes because I would check in with them. I would like watch their stuff, and I thought that they were genuine actors, only to find out that time and time again, when it matters most, they fold. Emma Vigeland, a white woman, has never had to put her skin or herself on the line for anything. And the one time that it was her opportunity to show class solidarity, she sided with her boss, Cenk Uygur, against the TYT's unionization efforts because she didn't want to rock the boat. Mind you, her parents are filthy rich. She was an intern at TYT. She put her career before class solidarity. When it matters most, they show you who they are. So, yeah, I'm not sympathetic to these characters, whether it's Emma Vigeland, Hassan Piker, Sam Cedar, The Vanguard, Kyle, KKK Kalinske. You know, I think that they're all horrible fucking people. So, yeah.
And on that note, we will get us out of here. head over to Deculturation if you want to listen to Carlos read the classic Open Veins Open Veins of Latin America. Great text. One I put up with, like, Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa as one of those great kind of third world texts, looking at just doing a material analysis in a very, literally looking at gold, silver, oil, copper, all of that, and how imperialism racked and de-developed Latin America, and continues to this day, and by the great Eduardo Galeano. So yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything else about that before you go.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I'll be reading that. We'll do like the intro section for sure, and we'll read a little bit more. So that's always going to be available on Up. But to be part of the conversation afterwards for the book club, essentially, that'll be on the Discord, which you could get access to through the Patreon, just a little as $2. And all support helps. I'm genuinely humbled and blown away by people's willingness to support and sign up, which I appreciate. But being first generation, I'm uncomfortable with it, but it lights a fire under me to make sure that I, continue to provide and put out content that is at the very least enjoyable, if not maybe educational, if I get lucky. So, but yeah, thank you, Jared. Honestly, like, I was watching Millennials Are Killing Capitalism for a while, and so, like, being on here for a second time, like, it's a trip. Nick from the Red Nation just hit me up, which again blows me away, and I'm just like, I don't know how I found myself here, but I'm gonna keep doing what I've been doing, which is just being honest, sincere, and talking shit. That's all I can do. So I appreciate the platform and the time, bro.
You're welcome. You cut out a little bit. You said, what did you say about Nick from Red Nation?
Oh, he hit me up, so that was cool. So it's just bewildering to me. It throws me off that, like, platforms and individuals who I admire, Dr. Ball included, Mtume, I'm very fucking fortunate. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, no, that's dope. I'm glad that was the case, because I saw you talking about getting into some shit in the Red Nation chat the other day, and that I was like, oh no, I hope that I hope this isn't going to rock the boat in our world over here.
I was thrown off. I was surprised. And so I kind of just, I'm a knucklehead. I get emotional sometimes, and I just reacted because I can't stand Matt Leck from the Majority Report. I can't, I actually really did like David Gruesome for quite a while. And then he ended up blocking me because he kept like wagging his finger at liberal Zionists. And I'm like, bro, like, your former peers are liberal Zionists promoting liberal Zionist positions. Emma Vigeland talking about Israel has the right to exist because it does exist. Sam Cedar talking about, oh, I don't think Israel should disappear. Like shit, why are you calling that out? Like, it would matter so much more if you called that out, because their audience would be forced to reckon with the fact that they're liberal Zionists promoting liberal Zionism. And you blocked me for it. So fuck all those who's wrong.
All right, man. Appreciate it. We'll have to do a part 3 where we can get into all of the thorny criticisms of Carlos from the comment sections. So yeah, if you like this, if you hate it, leave us a comment, let us know. Yeah. Somebody said Manny Nile said Carlos is probably blocked by half the cafe leftist streamers. Can't wait to see the Red Nation collab. Yeah, that sounds good. I hope that. Yeah. Sure. All right, man. I'm gonna let you go.
All right, brother.
Yeah. All right. Peace.
Later.